All right, we're live. I'm Joshua Kemble, and this is my live stream. I am an artist, and I'm going to work on comics during this stream. I've been doing this for a while. What I usually do is work on pages for my graphic novel, my current graphic novel that I'm working on. It's my third one, called Not Death But Love, The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which is like a Victorian um, era historical fiction graphic novel about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, and it talks about these. They're two very famous poets in the history of poetry and literature. If you feel like you haven't really heard of them, chances are you have. Like even if you don't read poetry, um, the whole phrase like "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways," that kind of thing. Boom, that is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So whether you think you've heard of them or not, like they've had a huge impact on society, and we're writing a graphic novel for it. We got a publishing deal for it, so it's pretty exciting. And it also talks about some stuff that other stories that have tackled the history of Elizabeth Barrett Browning have completely ignored that are present in her letters. And one of those things is her interest in spiritualism and seances in an attempt to kind of contact her lost brother, as well as like an intriguing relationship with a spiritualist, not like a relationship, but a growing interest in like, um, and a contention that kind of caused a curveball in her her relationship with Robert, and also caused like a deeper spiral to an addiction to opium. And so it's a really interesting story. It's not as dark as it sounds. It's actually, it kind of feels like a Jane Austen. So if you took like Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice, and then you mixed it with like the suspense and ominousness of like the old Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes, it's got that vibe to it. I absolutely love the script. It's the first graphic novel I've committed to in a long time that wasn't written by myself, because I think it's a strong story. So that's what we're going to be working on tonight. Christopher Runciman stopped in and said hi. Please stay till the end. Be a finisher. I'm kidding. I start these streams really late. I never get surprised when people have to bail later on. As we get into the wee hours of the morning, at least on this end of the coast. So yeah, so that's what we're going to be working on. I might continue the kind of deep dive into some commentary on determinism, because it's an interesting topic to me. So unless a different topic comes up in chat, I'll probably talk a little bit about what I did a vlog on today. And we're going to work on some comics. So that's going to be it. If you're just tuning in, just so you know who I am, I'm Joshua Kemble. I've been an illustrator and graphic designer professionally for about 20 years. And I have published 2 graphic novels. One is Two Stories, which is a graphic novel that I wrote and illustrated that tries to destigmatize hard conversations about mental illness, talking about my own journey in a very confessional and candid, and I think honest way that a lot of people have noted is a little unusual in comics. And that's Two Stories. And then I have Jacob's Apartment, which is more of a snapshot of the life of 2 roommates who are in their early 20s. Both are kind of searching for their identity. They're thrown some curveballs in life, but one loses a family member, the other has a broken relationship, and they find themselves, as they're kind of spiraling and struggling to find identity, they find themselves kind of falling in love. And as they find themselves drawn together, their dreams and reality start interweaving. It's a doomed romance, so it is not a happy book, but it does, I think, I think it was pretty effective at feeling like a literal slice of life, which is kind of like the goal of slice of life stuff. So, um, yeah, so that's Jacob's Apartment, and I'll be playing trailers for those as the stream continues. And I want to start getting in the habit of maliciously rubbing my hands together like I'm plotting something. Yes, 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 we will stream and we will continue. Anyhow, So so that being said, yes, let's get to drawing. Yeah, and if you guys haven't yet, and you're watching this after the fact, or you tune in later or something like that, just so you know, I posted a vlog today as well on my and if you ever get confused about my content and stuff, I should mention this. I have playlists on my YouTube channel that kind of separate content very helpfully. So there's like an Artcasters playlist on there that runs all our Artcasters episodes where we have guest artists and we talk about process and stuff like that. There's a vloggins section that, you know, isolates all my little vlogs that I record in my car on my way to where I work as an art director. And then there's you know, the live stream. So which is just called Joshua Kemble live stream. Where I work on comics and occasionally play wild games of Risk that get very intense, which we might play tonight too. We'll see how that goes. So we're just going to kind of play it out. My goal is to finish the shading for page 72 of Not Death But Love, the aforementioned. It's on an A4 sheet of paper. That's what it's. It's not something I mentioned before. It's just it's mentioned on a sheet of A4. Aforementioned, but the aforementioned book, Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning is what we're going to be trying to finish. At minimum, we need to finish shading this page to kind of stay on schedule. And then if I have time, I'd like to possibly start flats too, flat colors underneath, and see how far we can kind of get on that. So that's the agenda for the night. Christopher said, I can't stick around. It's already 2 a.m. here. Have a great stream and have fun finishing your shading. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for starting. Chris has been kind of riffing on the video because the premise of the video I posted today was the idea of try to get in the habit as an artist to start and finish things. A lot of artists really struggle to finish stuff. And so I kind of go into the why, the psychology of it a little bit, and the benefits and some of the negatives of being a person who starts and finishes things, because sometimes that can actually be to a detriment. There are times where it's beneficial to start and abandon things, and I'm really bad at that. But I kind of talk about the strengths of that, especially for artists who have a tendency. We have wild imaginations. That's basically the gist. So you don't have to watch the video. You can just watch this live stream. I'm kidding. You should check out the video for a longer kind of deep dive into that. But that was kind of the rough gist of it. And then Christopher's been kind of riffing on that. Like on the video, he left like a half-finished comment. So I just replied with like a half-finished comment too, because we're joking that like, oh yeah, we should definitely start and fit. And it's like you don't finish the sentence. I'm here to explain jokes and ruin them. That's what I do. That is, I don't know if you guys knew that, but that is the theme of this live stream. You know, the followers of this live stream are all big fans of like the Kremlin, as I call them. We're all really big fans of starting jokes and then destroying them by over explaining them. That's why people watch me. They're like, could he take this joke that made me chuckle and then kind of just bury it like real deep in the ground by over explaining it? And I'm like, could I? Not only could I, that's my specialty. Did someone call the joke killer? Okay. Enough goofing around. Full disclosure too, starting a little later today. It's just very busy where I'm working. There's a lot I'm trying to accomplish at my day job, and it's mentally and physically exhausting stuff, but good stuff. And maybe we'll talk about that before we decide to pull up a Determinism video. And full disclosure, if we end up watching the Determinism video, we might be watching Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, which is, you know, two people I'm philosophically, you know, because I'm a believer and stuff like that. I don't agree with these people on everything. But they're really good thinkers and interesting thinkers. And so it would be interesting to kind of hear their take on determinism, because I think yesterday was like a person who wasn't like a hardcore determinist. I was trying to think like who's a good representation of like pure determinism. And I was like, oh, Sam Harris, like that guy's like big on determinism. So it might be interesting to hear his arguments for it. Most of the arguments that I've heard Sam Harris make, sometimes he has a really interesting podcast. I don't always agree with him, but he's an interesting thinker, and he definitely follows logical threads really well. And then people are obviously familiar with him for like the early, like what was it, the early 2000s atheism boom that happened online, where you had these like giant debates that were like these huge events with what they called the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which I actually and Sam Harris I believe was considered one of them. And quite a lot of those thinkers I'm actually I think are smart. I don't agree with, but I think they're smart. Sometimes they make bad arguments, though. Like, that's the thing. Sometimes people are really smart, but they don't make good arguments. But I don't think I could out logic Sam Harris. Let's see here. So that's full disclosure. We've talked for 11 minutes. Let's make some art. I'll stop talking and start showing. Okay, so over here, just so you know, this is the camera that's just showing my work. And part of why I like to do just have this view is to give you something visually stimulating that is not just the screen. Like, I think it's kind of fun for you guys to be able to see, you know, the hand moving. Another thing that made me think of this is quite often people think they need like crazy expensive equipment to do art, especially digital art. And okay, there are some expenses. Like quite often you're going to have to buy software, maybe a subscription, like an Adobe subscription. There's cheaper versions of things out there, but generally to get quality, you're going to have to kind of fork out a little bit of money. But to get a decent Wacom, it depends on your perspective. A lot of people might consider it very expensive to just get a Wacom in general, but to get just a tablet that doesn't have a screen, it's not that expensive. And I would say don't let people fool you that it's essential to have a screen tablet. No tool is essential for you to make art. You can make art with a freaking toothbrush. And actually, Christopher can attest to this because he experiments a lot with different materials and stuff. Sometimes a toothbrush is really cool. Like if you dip a toothbrush in ink and you like kind of flick it, or you dip it in paint and flick it, it actually creates this like random spatter pattern that's amazing. I've used that all the time when I work traditionally. So don't be opposed to just kind of using tools you got and the tools you can't afford. But another reason I like to show this is I don't work on a screen tablet or anything fancy. It's like a cheap, you could probably get one of these used for like $20. But they're, I think, new like 80 or was 80. They're probably even cheaper now. And they're very touch sensitive and they work really well. And once you get used to them, you can make really good art with like something very basic and simple. So, okay, so that's what this is up here. Obviously, you see it's just a camera showing me so I can talk to you guys and stuff. And then over here to the left is where I'm going to be working on my page. And you'll notice that the very last panel is not toned yet. And I have my guides visible, which is going to be a problem. Those guides are basically showing me... Wait, did I say clear guides? I don't think I want to clear guides. I think I want to do view show guides and turn that off. So those guides are great. But you know, guides are just showing me for the place that the page appears on the spread, they're showing me the bleed area, which is helpful when it comes to like final layout. And this is a tip that I've given before that some people don't consider, which is when you're working on your art, think about what the final product is. If it's going to be a book, you want to know the dimensions of your book. The last thing you want to do is finish a book, then have to scan everything in and format it for the publication. It's better to just, you know, pick like what size you want to publish at. Preferably pick a standard size so they can cut the sheets at an affordable rate. Because like the more custom your size, the more expensive your print run is going to be. And if you think that doesn't matter to publishers, like if you think, oh, I'm going to get a publisher and then they'll publish in whatever format I want, it's not the case. Like if you're Chris Ware, maybe you can convince people to make like a board game box with like 50 different processes of books. One's a golden book. Like he actually did that, but he's Chris Ware, right? For the average Joe, it's like to get a decent job with a publisher or whatever. Part of it is making it a win-win. So like their expense to put out the book, it's a lower risk, and the lower the risk, the more likely a business is to jump on board, because you want to mitigate risk. Like the thing all businesses are afraid of is taking a risk that was wrong and then suddenly they're out of business, right? So yeah, that's me rambling and saying, hey, when you're setting these things up, even when you're doing your roughs, like staying in dimension with the final product is a really helpful thing. You won't regret it when it comes to publication. All right. And actually, if you're doing like web comics and stuff, making sure you're also executing it in a way that could go to print. If you decide to go from web and you want to have digital assets or things, physical assets that you can sell, you probably are going to thank yourself later if you have them done either vector or high resolution so that they're usable, when it comes to print. Because I have heard horror stories of people who worked on digital comics that were then successful, and then they had to make a book, and they had a bunch of art that was like 72 ppi. And it's like, oh man, you're screwed. So they had to like redo and reformat a lot of their art, and that wouldn't have taken as long if they just thought ahead and were like, I need to make this so the physical product can actually happen. Okay, that's it for ranting. Wow, I'm on a rant today. Even my vlog, I was like very long-winded, but now it's like 11:17. I don't want to eat into all my time just blabbing, so let's draw. And I think before getting into the determinism thing, which I think is really fascinating, I want to talk a little bit about what was it? Oh, so something else I've been thinking about recently. And again, like this isn't like profound stuff. I'm not like I'm a guy who thinks a lot, but I don't like profess to be like a crazy deep thinker or something like that. Let's get everything kind of moving on the art, and then we'll get into an interesting topic before determinism. Determinism will be fun though if we can get there. But so the thing that I've been thinking about recently, one other thing, and I'm a little sleepy. It's a little late, so you gotta forgive me if I'm a little loopy on topics. But basically, I have been thinking a lot about, and now I'm blanking out. It's a really interesting topic too. Let me think for a second, because I'm also like doing multitasking thing, which I'm okay at. But let me give it a minute, kind of process my thoughts here. So now I'm blanking out. I had a really good topic that I thought was interesting. It was kind of tied to determinism. Now I'm blank. That's hilarious. That never happens to me. I am a talker, and I do not run out of subjects to talk about. So that's fascinating that I had it and it just went. So maybe determinism is what we get into. If that doesn't pop back into mind. So while I'm kind of trying to refresh my brain and kind of recall it, what are you guys working on if you are watching? And what are your projects and stuff like that? And how are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a fascinating day. Oh, okay. It came to me. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. I know that doesn't make for the best content when you have somebody mid-sentence forget where they were heading. Probably happens to me more than I'd like to admit. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about um, the idea of a few things. Like one is kind of like, and now I'm blanking out again. One is one thing I can kind of start talking about is in regards to like will. Oh, okay. I have it back. Man, I'm sleepy. This is the problem of working at night after you've already worked a shift. Cool. Chris Caligia said he's working on a Mondo sketch for a charity thing. Nice. Chris Caligia, super talented illustrator, friend of mine, old classmate from Cal State Long Beach, and crazy talented illustrator. Okay. So here's something I've been thinking about in regards to kind of the topic that I did a vlog on. So I'm gonna really quickly gloss over kind of what the vlog talked about, and if you want more in depth, just watch the vlog where I kind of talk about trying to change your mindset as an artist. If you're an artist or a person who catches yourself quite often stating or iterating a idea, like being really good at ideation, like imagination, and being really bad at kind of seeing it from start to finish, being a better person at like starting and abandoning. And if you find that being a pattern, challenging yourself to actually start getting in the habit of like starting and finishing things is really good. But in relation to that, I also think there's a cultural problem. This is before I'm going to go into possibly watching a video on determinism. So, hey guys, this is weird. I'm an artist and we're going to talk philosophy from my armchair over here. And really bad philosophy because I'm not a philosopher. But so what I've been thinking about is the idea of hardship in our society and struggle is is almost like demonized. And I get it because it's not comfortable. And I feel like quite often our society is like kind of basing things on comfort. And I think that it kind of screws up our mindset as artists. And I guess I shouldn't say our mindset. I should make this more specific, right? Because I shouldn't speak in generalities here. I have observed that it affects me. The way that I feel sometimes like society is inherently like resistance to the idea of struggle and things being kind of hard. Um, and the value in that, it it can kind of mess with my head. Like it can kind of get me in a mindset where if I'm facing resistance or struggle when I'm trying to accomplish something, um, I can get fooled into thinking that that's some kind of unique thing, and it's not. And that's kind of what I thought was an interesting observation in regards to like the starting and finishing thing. And I kind of touched on this a little bit in the video, but like the reason we like to kind of just imagine, the reason imagination's fun, the reason play is fun, is you don't have to like realize anything. You kind of can keep it in the soft, safe, uncommitted zone. Like you can keep your ideas floating in this ether in which they could be perfect, right? And so there's this thing that I think is happening with that. And I think some of it is the idea that we should be clearing pathways so that there is no resistance or struggle. And I think that can be really dangerous because I think that living a life in which you are opting to struggle, not like for the purposelessness of just struggling, that would be insanity, but opting to struggle for the good of the struggle. um, Opting to kind of go through the hard points to kind of get to the great stuff. And I almost think of it like relationships, right? Like you're gonna have friendships with people. Like to have a good friendship, you're gonna have some hard points. And some people, experience less conflict or whatever in friendships or more conflict or something like that. But at some point, if you're dealing with another human being with free agency, although like I was, we were watching a thing on determinism the other day, so who knows, maybe we don't have free agency in this. But point being, let's just assume we're all free agents for this discussion. And like, because like people with free agency are going to pick things that are in conflict with each other, even if they're like both people who like each other, right? Inevitably there's going to be a point where I want to go see Spider-Man and you want to go see uh everything all at once or whatever. You know what I mean? You're gonna have two conflicting ideas, and maybe they're both things you both enjoy, but there's a disagreement. Like, and it could be the most passive disagreement on earth. But the point being, like, it's not always going to be smooth. Just making the decision to go to a movie with people, right? Now, does that mean that, like, if you don't have friends, you're just always going to agree with whatever you want to go see at a movie theater? You just shouldn't go see movies? Like, I feel like sometimes societally, that's kind of the message that's being sent across, is like, surround yourself with yes men and, avoid struggle at all costs. And honestly, some of this is just marketing, and it's good marketing, right? Because like, if I'm going to sell a product, right, or if I'm trying to sell a product, particularly a product like I don't know, let's throw something out there like a toaster. Like, if I want to sell a toaster, what do I want you to think when you're going to check out that toaster? I want you to think about the utility and the ease that this toaster is going to provide your life. Like, all the toasters you've had in your life are a pain in the butt because I'm just riffing here on how I think marketing and sales tend to work. Where it's like, all the toasters in your life kind of suck, right? Like, they get filled with crumbs. You have to clean them constantly. If you don't clean those crumbs, even if they have the little slide tray, right? We've all had that moment where you have like a toaster, you forgot to kind of dump the crumbs, and you start toasting a bagel or a piece of bread, and suddenly you just have this like smell of just burnt, you know, like all those crumbs are just turning into charcoal, and that smell just fills your house. And now suddenly this thing that was supposed to be a help has actually caused more work than it possibly would have been if you had just toasted it a different way than a toaster. So if I'm selling a toaster, I want to kind of hone in on that. Like, what's your anxiety about toasters, right? What are our competitors' toasters causing for you, right? And then not only that, how am I going to frame this, whether subtly or not, that, like, you know what? Struggling when you're toasting something sucks. Make it less of a struggle. Our toaster will make your life easier, right? Because the whole point in life is to relax and to not struggle. That's the sales pitch. And it's an effective sales pitch, right? Because people in general, when they're buying stuff, they want confirmation that they are making a good choice. So that's the first thing. You want to convince them, hey, you're making the right choice here, right? But not only that, because there's buyer's remorse, right? And then not only that, like, you also want to convince people like that the whole purpose of life is luxury, because you're trying to sell items, and quite often those items you're trying to sell are things they don't actually need, and they are luxuries. So you want to convince people like luxury is essential. It's the purpose of life is to be relaxed and happy and comfortable, and anything to the contrary, should be pushed aside, and you should fill your life with products that are going to make you comfortable, make your life painless, and really put you in a point where you don't have struggle. Like, it doesn't have to be a struggle. Just use our product. It doesn't have to be a struggle. Just pay for our therapy. It doesn't have to be a struggle. Let's just find ways in which it is not a struggle. But as you get older, you're going to find that, like, parenting is a good example, right? Where it's like, anyone who tells you that being a parent isn't a struggle is probably not a parent. And it doesn't mean that it's not a worthwhile struggle, but man, it's hard. It's very time consuming. It pulls you away from a lot of things you really enjoy. It can really occupy and consume a lot of time, and you can kind of get lost and lose track of time, and you blink and years have gone by because it is so all encompassing. Um, so describing that, in our society, I think a lot of people would hear that because of all the, like, again, because of marketing and sales and societal expectations in a very consumeristic society. A lot of people would kind of hear that with that framework and be like, yep, parenting must be totally awful. I'm never going to do it. I don't want to lose those freedoms, right? Because the whole purpose of life, in a lot of people's minds is like freedom, and a lack of anxiety and comfort. So it's like it's all about comfort and freedom, and has little to do with struggle. Like you want to alleviate any sort of resistance that you're going to face along the road. You want to just a smooth path, and you want to get things that are going to be smoothing the path. You want to any sort of conflict in life, you want to kind of extricate, so you have this like clean, smooth path. Is this making sense where I'm kind of going with this? I hope so. So this is something I've been thinking about with, so this I feel is like so present in our society that it's very easy to get lost in that and have moments where I'm like, man, I need to really seek this thing that's going to make this smooth and easy so I can relax. But then I think about like the things in life that have been worth it for me, like, and parenting's a really good example where it's like, dude, the best thing I've ever done in my life was having my son. Like it was the coolest thing. And most parents are going to say this, but it was the coolest thing I've ever done. Um, you know, it's just like, yeah. So Chris was saying, man, parenting is like a crazy extended workout routine. It 100% is, right? And it's exhausting. And you suddenly realize why all parents are exhausted, why your parents would be like, you'd be like, let's play. And they'd be like, I just really need a minute, like, because they're exhausted. And it is exhausting. But again, like I think about like, okay, what's the best thing I've done in my life? Was it like advancing in my career? Was it all these other things? And I'm like, no, it was like choosing to have a kid. Like, um, and going through that struggle has been one of the most identity changing, really cool experiences in the world. And it's nothing like special. That's what I mean. I mean, it's special to me, but it's not like it took a, like, I didn't need a college degree to have a kid, like you don't like it is a lot of work, but like it's very, a lot of people can do it. A lot of people can do it surprisingly, from multiple like cultures, education levels, all of that. A lot of people can have a kid and be okay and raise that kid. Like we've been doing it for centuries as humans, centuries, for like millions of years. Um, so why is this thing we've been doing for like millions of years that like almost anyone can do, but it's like a lot of work. It does require like a conscious choice to kind of be like, I'm going to I'm going to take this road that's like a smooth path, and I'm going to add a giant mountain in my path, like a mountain that I have to scale. And it's not just a mountain that I have to scale. It's so tall that I'm going to have to scale that mountain till I die. Like I'm going to pick that path rather than the smooth path with a really clear finish line. Why would anyone do that? And why have they done it for like millions of years when they choose to create art in the face of adversity? Like, you look at the history of art, there are artists, in France that were making art in the salon that they knew, like the second it exhibited in the salon, like they might get arrested, like, and they'd opt to do it. Why? Right? It's an interesting, to me, it's interesting. Like, why would somebody opt to make art that's going to push boundaries and put them in jail? Right? But people have done this forever. Why would somebody opt to write a song that they know isn't going to get radio play, but they know it's good? Like, why? Why not just, like, if you're a musician, just write pop songs? You like write songs that you absolutely know will be a hit. why do people, choose to run marathons and do these things, right? And I think it's this part um, of our society. And don't get me wrong, it's not like our whole society is blind to this. I think a lot of people are clued into this. That the most rewarding things that you can do in life are going to have struggle, and not only struggle, like they're actually going to be hard to do. Like the easy path, it's a truism, but it's like the easy path with no thorns and stuff like that is the most appealing looking path on the world. But it turns out that, like, in most cases in life, that path is like the worst path you could pick. It's like it's like the least rewarding. It leads to the you usually don't get like a lot of actual return for your investment in that. It's like the riskless path, the path of no resistance, the smooth road with no bumps on it is rarely worth taking. But I think people have gotten um, comfortable with being comfortable, and have prioritized comfort over a lot of things that possibly are more important, and most likely are highly more important than comfort, because life isn't about comfort. I think regardless of your theory on life, I don't think life's intention is for us to be comfortable. It ends uncomfortably, it starts uncomfortably. For you to exist is uncomfortable for other people, right? Again, parenting example, if you think as a kid you are just this giant blessing on your parents and you don't intrude on their comfort, that's not true. It's a huge intrusion on your comfort, but it's a conscious choice to put yourself in that situation. So it's not on the kid that they are doing that. Like, the kid's great. And honestly, they maybe, it could be that all those moments of giving away that comfort leads to a greater comfort. That's like a more existential reward for that. But either way, like, here's the thing. Even if you're a parent where you're like, you're going to raise your kid or whatever, and that, like, when they turn a certain age, this whole experience is literally not going to return anything. Like, if you were cognizant of that, like, you could go into the future and you could be like, this kid, it's actually going to end up badly. I would make the case that even then there is still a responsibility as a parent, even if you had like, you could see the future and you could know, like, you know 25 years, 30 years ahead, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this was the worst mistake of my life, right? Which would be horrible as a parent to say, but I'm just saying, even if you could go in the future and just guarantee that that was the case, I think there is something deeper than comfort. And I think, like, with a parent, being a parent, it's like, I feel it. There's a responsibility to set aside your own comfort because you've made a conscious decision to put yourself in discomfort to take care of and raise another life, right? And it's a conscious decision. So, like, regardless of the outcome, I'm not talking about some Ayn Randian scheme where it's like, oh, you need to be a parent because eventually it's just going to be a better reward for you. That's most times probably is true. I think in my life that probably will be true, because I've just experienced, like, these blissful, existentially deep, um, moments as a parent that I had never experienced in my life. Like, you get I think a view on love that's it's just different because it's unearned love. Like, and I don't know if that makes sense. It's like you love, like, sacrificially love your kid to the point where they don't earn it. They don't earn it at all. They couldn't do anything to earn it. It's just there. That's a weird love. Like, most love is slightly transactional, in this world. And it's an interesting thing to make a conscious choice to put yourself in a scenario where you'll probably be more taxed, more stressed, have more responsibilities placed on your shoulder. Uh, it's going to drain your finances. It's going to, I could make a list of all the things it causes, and yet it's probably one of the best decisions somebody can make. But I'm not saying it's the best decision because it's all going to come back and reward them. There's something deeper. I think. I think there's something deeper than just what for me. What do I get out of this? There's something deeper. I think there's something deeper than comfort, because I think the comfortable path would be just don't have a kid. If you want to feel comfort all the time, just don't. But life isn't about comfort, and marketing is about comfort, right? You want to, like, you get this toothpaste, you will never have teeth problems, right? You know what? In fact, this toothpaste is so good it just stops entropy. You know what I mean? That's what you want to do in marketing, whether subtle or over the top. That's the message you want people to feel about your toothpaste, right? You want people to be like, I am confident I'm buying the right toothpaste, so I didn't buy the wrong toothpaste. I'm not wasting my time and money. And man, you know what? Like, they're right. Like, I bet this toothpaste is better, and I'm never going to have to go to the dentist again. And I'm not going to die. That's really marketing. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't know if this is interesting to other people. This is just something I've thought about today, was just how, when I was talking about, like, one of the things I kind of pride myself in, even though sometimes it's a flaw, is the ability to, like, start and finish something. And I'll do it, I'll even fail at it if I have to. But gosh darn it, I'm going to finish that sentence and put a period at the end, even if it's a bad sentence. It's like, once I determine, like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, I do it. Sometimes to a fault. But I was trying to think, like, why? Like, why should somebody actually take that advice of, like, becoming a person who, like, starts and finishes things, right? Because it doesn't necessarily promise a reward. And that's so I was grappling with that. I'm like, what is my thinking behind that? And I was realizing, like, it's because I don't think the purpose of life is comfort. I think comfort is nice. I think feeling comforted is nice. But I think there's a lot of things that are actually about pain and struggle. And I don't think that's always bad. Like, some of the best things you can do are going to be the hardest and most painful things you can do. A marathon, like, people don't run marathons to feel good. I mean, maybe they feel good after, but they don't feel good because it was, like, this comfortable experience. People run marathons for a reason. And there's some reason that gives us, like, an intrinsic feeling of worth, like doing something challenging that's hard and kind of seeing it through to finish. There's, like, a reward we get that's a little deeper than comfort. And it's a weird reward, because it's like we literally stared discomfort in the face and we ignored discomfort in order to achieve something or make something happen. Chris said, did you watch Arrival? That bit with the parents hits extra hard now. I have not. So you got to kind of explain the bit with the parents. I will say, I'm roughly guessing what that was, because ever since having a kid, there's movies I used to watch. A good example, Ben was, like, maybe, like, a year old or something. And Maya and I were talking about The Untouchables, and I think she was saying she hadn't seen it. I was like, dude, you have to. I mean, it's kind of a rad movie. You should see The Untouchables. And then there's the the baby carriage scene, which is like notorious. It's like this big suspense scene where you got this baby carriage, there's a gunfight, and the baby carriage is like falling down the steps. And so it's like it's kind of cutting between the tension of like this gunfight and what's going to happen with the baby. Like, it's really well cut. It's a little over the top, but it's still a fun movie. Um, fun might be the wrong term for it, but anyhow, so I hadn't seen it, since becoming a parent, and so I was like, wow, that's a really great, like, intense scene, and I watched it again, and I had to shut it off. I've become such a wuss. I was like, I just can't take it. I can't take it. That carriage, if it falls, that baby's gonna die. And then these stupid idiots, like, I just couldn't. I was like, I can't do the like baby in peril thing now. I just can't. Like, there was another movie too. It was like a TV show, and it was like a fantasy TV show or something. And um it started with like a tale that like most Roald Dahl stories start with. It's like, this kid who's got these great parents, and the first 5 minutes, it's just like tragedy. Like they're in a car wreck and his parents die. Like, boom, that's the intro to the movie. And then I think it moves on to like some profound thing. But I watched the first 5 minutes and I was like, I can't watch this. That's messed up. I can't do it. So I've become a real wuss when it comes to stuff like that. And it's so weird because it didn't even hit me before. I was pretty desensitized to anything like that in movies, because I'm just like, yeah, it's just a kid in a movie. Like, who cares? It's fiction. But now it's like, there's like this weird little like thing that just unlocks where you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't do this. I can't go there with this. Yeah, I've heard really good things about Arrival. So I think that, Chris, I will take you up on that. Is it streaming anywhere? And then I think the director, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think the director is super good for that. I think I've seen other stuff by that director. So and again, like, I think it's got like I've also heard it has like am I crazy here? Maybe I'm thinking the wrong movie, but I've had people tell me it's like kind of weird because it's also like a bit Charlie Kaufman-ish, even though it's like a sci-fi. And I'm like, oh, you got me there, because I love Charlie Kaufman, and the idea of a Charlie Kaufman like science fiction alien movie I mean, that vibe is like beyond interesting to me, because I love the themes that like Kaufman goes into. And I had a friend who said something like that. Now, maybe my friend was insane, so you'll have to let me know, Chris, if that's at all accurate. But yeah, that in itself made me really interested in it. But anyway, it's just got me thinking about like struggle and pain and how sometimes that's actually what life is about. And not in a negative way, like in like a really kind of profound way. And I think we rob ourselves. I guess I would say I rob myself if I start buying into the marketing and thinking everything's about consumption and comfort and pain avoidance. Because some of the most valuable things you're going to experience in life are painful. And it reminds me of like Princess Bride, right? In Princess Bride, where he says, "Life is pain, Your Highness." It reminded me of that. And you know what's funny? Princess Bride, man. That movie gets so much better as you get older. I think I will contend that that movie takes on a lot more significance and interest as you get older. And it's an interesting movie because it can both be entertaining and funny and like witty when you're a kid, and when you're an adult, it like all of the allegory of it starts becoming clear as day, and you're like, oh, like the pit of despair. It's not like just some thing like that's actually like, okay, this is the part in this like love story where they're gonna hit the depths of despair, right? Can you survive the depths of despair to kind of face boldly, the challenges in your life? Like there's things in that movie that are so just like on the note. Like, some people have criticized it because it's so on the nose allegorical, right? Um, But I think it's interesting, and even, some of the statements in it, like life is pain. It's like, yeah, it is. It's it's not about, you know, feeling good all the time. Sometimes the right thing is feeling bad. And I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about. So, we're getting further on the tones in the page. I hope this is of interest to you guys. I get in these moods, like, so there's times where I'll do like these goofy streams that are super silly, and then I have these strange moods where I get super thinky about stuff, and that doesn't mean it's good. So, you got to let me know, also in the comments or whatever, if you watch this and it's just like, dude, these streams are bumming me out. But even that, like, I am a person who I really enjoy tragedies, and even though I was saying there's like some stuff with kids now that I just can't watch because it's just like, as a parent, it's just too close. It's like, a good example of this that I actually related to was when Chris Ware released Building Stories. I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. And I have a friend who's got a daughter, and it was just too much. He was like, it's brilliant. I can't. He's like, it's just because if you've read like Building Stories by Chris Ware, you'd be like, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. Because it's very, like, Chris Ware's stuff has this like tone to it where it really feels real. Like, his stories, as much as his characters are very strange and stuff like that, and quite often even the style is like this weird infographic thing, but the second you start reading Chris Ware, it's like a very real experience. Like, it feels like life. And so, like, even when I'm reading Chris Ware, I have to like set aside like a week just to kind of digest it. But it's a worthwhile week, right? It's like facing the void to read Chris Ware. But I can understand, especially Building Stories. If you're like a father and you have a daughter, maybe that void is just too much at that point, because it's like, I just don't want to talk about that void. We'll get there when we get there. Dennis Villeneuve directed. I don't know how to pronounce that name, and I feel bad, Chris, because I know you've worked with that guy. But yeah, so he did Dune and Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner, that was it. Okay, that was the biggest surprise of a lot of movies that came out. I sincerely thought that it was just going to be when they announced they were making, Blade Runner sequel, I was one of those people who's like, dude, this is gonna be disastrous. Why would you take a perfect movie and do it didn't need a sequel, like all of this. Like, I had all of those reservations. So I went in like super skeptical, expecting to just see the worst movie I've ever seen. I heard good things, and I was like, I'm not even trusting these good things. This is going to be a terrible movie. And it was amazing. Not only did it honor the earlier movie, but I think there's points in it where it might actually be superior, which is insane because Blade Runner is a profoundly good movie. So for them to have made, so this director is good. That's all I'm saying. To pull that off, it's, I think that's harder than pulling off a sequel to Star Wars, because that movie is so rich. And that world is so rich, but it's not like Star Wars rich, where it's like a playground that you can get wild in. It's like the themes. Blade Runner is a movie about ideas that are really deep, and it goes like 10 layers deep. And then just when you think you're at the depths of it, it goes 10 layers deeper. And not only that, it's like a visual masterpiece. So it's like, it's got so many things going for it. And I'm not saying Star Wars doesn't. It's just Star Wars, I think, has more of a playground to it that you could play in as a writer. But if somebody were telling me I had to write a sequel to Blade Runner, I'd just be like, yeah, get somebody else. Like, I'm not the guy for that job. Because that's too intimidating. And whereas if somebody hired me to do like something in the Star Wars universe, I'd be like, let's do this. You know, like if people hate it, cool, whatever. We're gonna honor it as best we can. It'd be fun. I don't know why that's separated from me, but I have to say that he's got to be an amazing. Yeah, Chris was saying, I don't think I can watch Logan without bawling now. I haven't watched since having my own X-23 clone daughter. Yeah. You know what I've been thinking about? I've never seen the movie of The Road, but I love The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I haven't really, and I've read the book a couple times. I don't think I could right now. I mean, it's a dark book anyway. It's so heavy. It was a hard read. Like, it's just not an easy read. That book is misery. You know, you opt to read something that is going to make you miserable. and it's brilliant. But yeah, I don't think I can take that whole father in doomed situation with kid opting to survive for the sake of hope. In a hopeless situation where there is no hope, and ending just on hope, but with no purpose, like with no backing for why you would be hopeful. You know, it's I don't know if I can handle that as a dad, just to be like being just the idea of imagining being put in a situation like The Road with your son. It's like I just no, cannot do that. Chris said, that's a pretty stark story. You've read it voluntarily multiple times. Yep. I love it. I think it's one of the best. I mean, it's one of the better books like written, but it's a heavy experience, you know? And that's what I'm kind of getting at with art. We're not always meant to just be doing fast food. I think this is human nature. I think fast food's okay, right? Fast food's okay. Fast food's comfort, right? But it's comfort that'll kill you. that's the nature of fast food. Fast food is not designed for you to eat it all the time, and we all eat it a little too much in the U.S. And I'll admit I still eat fast food a little too much because, man, I commute a lot, and there's times where I'm on the road home and like I'm hungry, man. I need something in my stomach. I don't have time 2 hours later to do this. I'm gonna just spin by somewhere and pick something up. But we're not meant to have fast food all the time. It's really bad. It has a lot of bad byproducts. There's fast food in art that is really fun. It's a quick fix. It's comfortable. And if we have too much of it, I think it's bad. It's bad for us. It's bad for our souls. There's times where you need that steak dinner, or you need that like really finely presented food that's complex, not just full of a bunch of like filaments that are meant to fulfill your taste buds and make you hungrier and make, you know, chicken taste ridiculously like addictive because it's hitting all these chemical things in our brain. No, sometimes you need the thing that's like actually good. It's actually good for you. It's of substance. Sometimes you need to eat the vegetables, right? That's what I'm getting at. Like, life is not all dessert. And if you make it all dessert, you're missing a lot. And it, you know, yeah. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about. I might just sound like an old man venting, but yeah, Chris was saying you got to carry the fire, Dad. Yep, that's true. And like, that's the thing. I think if I were in a road scenario now, actually, that story even makes more sense. Um, Anybody who's not familiar with Cormac McCarthy's The Road should consider it. You know, I think before having a kid, like the mom in that just is so rational. At the beginning, it just made so much sense. Where it's like you're literally not going to get out of this situation. You're going to go through hell. Why would you opt to do that? You know. But now I kind of get it a little more. I think I might be the guy in the road. I think that's why I don't think I could read it. Because I might actually end up being that guy if I were put in that situation. And that's crazy. That's crazy to think. Because again, before being a parent, I thought he's just crazy. The mom's the one that knows what's up and makes the right call. Now I'm like, nope. Couldn't make her call. That would be the wrong call. And I feel like the guy's call is right, but I have no idea why. Because it probably just ends in misery, after the notorious ending in that. Anyhow, okay. What do we got, guys? We're at the hour mark. We've talked about this for quite a bit. I don't know why I've been on these kind of strange topics as of late, but I'm feeding the demon because that beautiful demon of strange topics is helping me get through this panel at a late time at night. So are you guys in chat. So thanks for hanging out and making art with me. Let me know what you guys are working on. I guess Chris was saying he was drawing a Mondo sketch for a charity thing. That's cool. That sounds awesome. Mondo's cool too. Okay, we're at the hour mark, so we're gonna watch a trailer. What trailer shall we watch? I think we'll watch Jim Lujan's beautiful trailer. It's probably my favorite trailer anybody submitted. And by the way, appreciation and thanks to everybody who has submitted a trailer. If you guys are interested in having your stuff promoted on my live streams, just make a 1 to 1.5 minute trailer that mentions both Two Stories and Jacob's Apartment, or one of them. And then you can mention your own work and stuff like that. And I will play it in rotation on breaks during the show. So it's a way to promote your stuff. It's a way to promote my stuff. And it gives me more material and the audience more material, for those times where I have to step out and refill a glass of water. So, but anyhow, let's watch Jim Lujan's brilliant cartoon, and I'll be back after that. And maybe we'll dig into the determinism stuff. If you guys have any questions or any topics you want me to kind of dive into before we get into watching the conversation, which, by the way, I haven't watched this yet. Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett kind of talking about determinism. So we're probably going to get, at least on Sam Harris's end, a more kind of solid determinism argument that I think will juxtapose nicely with the video that we watched the other day. So consider this if this is something you want, while I'm doing the playing the trailer, and then when I come back, I'll read chat, and then we'll possibly dive into the determinism business. Okay. Oh, before I play the trailer, I want to correct something. I thought that Chris was saying he was doing something for Mondo that was doing a charity. Mondo's a company. That's kind of cool. And he said, name Mandalorian Mando. Even cooler. Okay. But I'm glad to correct that. I don't want to spread false information, Chris. Okay, here we go, guys. There is here's the trailer by Jim Lujan, and I'll be back and we'll finish up this panel. And I think by that point, maybe we'll be at a point where we either flat color or we play a game of Risk, depending. I'm going to leave that to the times to figure out. Okay, here it is.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter. Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm going to go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon? Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of Two Stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was gonna get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
Okay, we're back. We have tea going. Trying to not do caffeine late at night because I'm getting older. I used to, into the wee hours, just chug like gallons of coffee, black, because I love it. But as you get older, you gotta watch it. You gotta watch yourself. All right. So I haven't heard any. Chris said, "Love that Luhan trailer." Yeah, it was like one of the most flattering, amazing experiences of my life to get that. I'm not even overplaying that. Like, I've loved Jim's work forever. I was so flattered years ago when he asked me to do a voice for one of his characters. It was like, dude, of course I'm down. Like, it's Jim Luhan. You know, he's one of my favorite. I think he's one of the funniest people on the planet. And honestly, one of the most underrated. Like, people are not aware of how genius like Jim is. And if you're watching this, that's all lies. I don't want to feed your ego. But anybody else watching this, I'm not lying. Like, he's I think a legitimately comedic genius. And so for like somebody that I hold in that high of regard, who's a friend, to just take like their time to do that, for me is like not only insane, but also just insanely flattering. Like, so yeah, that was very, very cool of Jim to do. That's why, honestly, everybody's trailers I really appreciate, but that one hit an extra mark. I admire most people's work, but Jim's somebody I put on a pretty high level for like just how much I respect their work. Which, you know, it's very goofy, silly stuff, but I really love comedy, and I think he's functioning on that like higher level. You know, and is underrated. He's like the Pixies. Like, how have you not heard the Pixies? You know, yeah. So yeah, it felt kind of like that. Like one of my favorite things, like the Pixies, they wrote a song about me. It's like that. It's that kind of feeling where it's like, even if I was friends with Frank Black, that would be like the coolest experience in my life, you know? So that was one of them. Not the coolest, but it was a really, as corny as it is, that was a really cool moment. Just I will remember that moment of getting that video and being like, oh my gosh, no way. Because I thought it was just going to be Jim on a camera just being like, hey, you guys should check out Josh's stuff, which in itself would be amazing. But the fact that he went out of his way to like make a Luhan thing, that was like, yeah, I can't even. And if Jim is watching, that's all BS. You know, that's not true. None of this is true. Don't let this feed your ego. Okay. Where were we? Oh, we were going to play the Determinism video. So here we go. And we're going to get through this panel, even though I'm feeling very tired. But we're not going to push it too hard. I'm going to put on my headphones and then we're going to comment on it. So this is a video called Sam Harris versus Daniel Dennett Free Will Debate. So we're going to watch a debate and we'll discuss it and kind of see what we think. And it'll be interesting. And I want to clarify, this is going to happen, especially on commentary stuff on this channel, because I like thoughts and people exchanging ideas. Just because I'm watching this does not mean I agree with it. And I would say that for like, if it was a theist on here, just because you're watching something does not mean you agree with it. So just keep that in mind, for anybody who's just like, oh my gosh, I have to preface it with that because I've literally just because Chris will get a kick out of this. Just because Jacob's character was wrestling with existentialism and ultimately kind of loses their faith. I've gotten emails from Christians that are just like, you need to like renounce your atheism and like all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm not an atheist. Like, what is wrong with you? So because of that, now I feel like if I'm playing, like, those same people are like, if they're watching my YouTube channel, are gonna be like, oh, he's playing the atheists, like, So I feel like I kind of have to preface it like, hey, I don't necessarily agree with these, but I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what they're saying. How about this? How about we just watch an exchange of ideas and be mature enough to realize like we can I can hear somebody express a viewpoint I might maybe agree with or I might disagree with, and I can learn from it and grow as a human being. It's this wild thing. I'm not saying this mostly to chat because I think my chat gets it, but it's one of those funny things. Okay, guys, ready, set, go. Oh, one question. I know there's not a lot of viewers because it's like late in the night or early in the morning, depending where you're at. If you are watching, even if you haven't been participating in the chat, I'm just going to ask one thing, because when I play these clips, I just want to make sure you can hear them. So I'm going to play like 20 seconds of this and just type yes in the chat if you hear it. Okay. Because I don't want this to go for like an hour where I'm commenting on it and literally no one on the replay or live is able to hear what I'm commenting on. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to play. You tell me if you can hear it. Just type yes if you can and no if you can't. Okay, and 1, 2, 3, play.
In Banff, and we have stolen away from the main session, and we are in a bar and about to have a conversation about the misadventure we had in discussing free will online in a series of articles.
So, by the way, I think this is just audio. So, that doesn't bother me because we have the video all small anyway. But can you guys hear that? Just type yes if you can, no if you can't. I'll let it go a little longer. Hopefully somebody lets me know in chat.
Articles and blog posts. I mean, you and I are part of a community.
Cool. Chris said sound is bueno.
A pretty visible part of a community that prides itself on being willing to change its opinions and views more or less in real time under pressure from better arguments and better data. And I think I said in my article in response to your review of my book, Free Will, that this is a very rare occurrence. I mean, to see someone relinquish his cherished opinion more or less on the spot under pressure from an interlocutor, that's about as rare as seeing a supernova overhead, and it really shouldn't be, because there's nothing that tokens intellectual honesty more than a willingness to step away from one's views once they are shown to be in error. And I'm not saying we're necessarily going to get there in this conversation about free will, but there was something that went awry in our written exchanges, tonally, and neither of us felt good about the result. And so, again, we'll talk about free will as well. But I think this conversation is proceeding along two levels, where there's the thing we're talking about philosophically, which is free will, but then there's just the way in which I want us to both be sensitive to getting hijacked into unproductive lines that make it needlessly hard to talk about what is just purely intellectual.
Okay, so let's pause for a second. So I actually have to say, like, okay, so Harris is very well spoken. He's a very meticulous articulator of ideas, and I don't always agree with every idea. But the thing I appreciate, and I do think this is, like, if you're going to get into debate, it can be fun to watch, like, the blood sport debates, where people are just like, they're going to tear each other a new one. And it's not about civility. It's about intellectual warfare, that can be super entertaining. Right. I think I watched one of those on this channel once, which was, we were kind of going on a little arc of watching flat earthers. There's some people who think the eighth is flat earthers. And we were watching people kind of debate the flat earth just out of curiosity. I just thought it was an interesting rabbit hole to go down because like I'm endlessly fascinated. How does somebody convince themselves that the earth is flat? That's like there's got to be some logic behind it. So I was like, okay, let's watch this thing. And after watching one where it was like a pretty civil debate, I was like, okay, we need to watch like a blood sport debate. So I watched Professor Dave Explains just tear a flat earther, just a new one. Like it was like it was the it was not a civil conversation. It was like I am going to destroy you intellectually every second that I have a window to kind of thing. And it was entertaining. I'll admit it was very entertaining. It's like watching a boxing match and you just watch somebody get annihilated. That can be entertaining. But I like what Sam Harris is saying here as a premise for an intellectual discussion, because the purpose of debate isn't always to win. Sometimes the purpose of a debate, it can be fun as a sport, watching like who's going to come out stronger, that kind of thing. But also, like, even for me right now, listening to this conversation, my intention is to expand my knowledge. And it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with everything, but worst case scenario is I will come out of listening to this with a better understanding of differing viewpoints. That's a really cool thing. That makes for a rich existence. Like having a rough idea of like, what do other people think, right? What's the steel man that of like an opposite position to what I have, right? That's always fascinating. So, and that can sometimes lead to really profound things like Sam Harris was talking about at the beginning of like, dude, some of the coolest things that'll happen in your life is when you change your mind. I was bringing up parenting before, right? I had a very long period of my time of my life where I was very anti the idea of parenting. I envisioned my future as I was not one of those people who like was like, when I grow up, I'm gonna have my own family and stuff like that. Like I was very much the opposite, where I was like, when I grow up, I'm gonna have like a crappy apartment in New York. I'm gonna be, single. I'm gonna be like, you know what I mean? Maybe I won't be single, but like I'm gonna be this broke artist who definitely doesn't have kids, very bohemian, living in like a bustling city and just making art, and that's it. That was kind of my vision for the longest time. And one of the best things that's happened to me was changing my mind on that. On my just viewpoint on kids. It was like it's been one of the most profound experiences of my life. My experience of changing my mind in my life, sometimes it can be hard. It can be really difficult to kind of accept that like something you thought is wrong. But being open to that is one of the most beautiful experiences in life, because when you are wrong and you're able to course correct, it's just so enriching in your life. We should be open to that. That's all I'm saying. So I like, I had to pause and just kind of kudos to the intro. We'll see how civil it stays, but yeah, that was really a well articulated way of kind of introducing a discussion where it's like, hey, let's make this productive. Let's not like get in the weeds and intentionally obstruct this conversation. Let's try to get somewhere, let's try to see what our viewpoints are. Let's steel man each other. I think that's a really hard thing to do, but it's also one of the most productive things you can do in those kind of discussions. Yeah, that's true. Chris was saying debate as sport and debate as exploration are super different, and both are really entertaining, and I enjoy watching both. But I like the idea of debate as discussion, where it's like, hey, give me your steel man for what you think, I'll give you mine, and let's steel man each other's positions, and let's see like what floats. Like, do both hold? Let's explore that. Like, rather than get all like ego driven about it and be like, oh, how dare you question the legs on this table I'm presenting? It's like, no, let's see if both tables have legs and they stand, and maybe if they both stand, we can just consider it like, that's interesting. Right? Okay, here we go. Boom.
Intellectual, philosophical matter, and one of great interest, surprisingly great interest to our audiences. There's no topic that I've touched that has surprised me more in the degree to which people find it completely captivating to think about. And I know you and I both think it's a very consequential topic. It's unlike many topics in philosophy. This one really does meet ethics and public policy in a way that is important. So, but one thing you all should know in listening to this is that we have one microphone. Perhaps this is a good thing because we really can't interrupt each other, and we're just going to pass this microphone back and forth. And I now give you Dan Dennett.
Thanks, Sam. This is a beautiful setting. If we can't agree on some things here, we shouldn't be in this business. I want to go back one step further in how this got started. You sent me the manuscript of your book, Free Will.
So let me pause here again. Adam said, out of the famous atheists who make it a big part of their identity, Sam Harris is by far my favorite existing atheist. And what's funny is I don't even know if Sam Harris is technically an atheist anymore, because he definitely believes in. He's gone a different route where he's kind of big on what is it called? Like he's big on expanding consciousness and mindfulness practices, which get into a little bit of more metaphysical religious ideas. And he's embraced those much more. So like the early Harris has changed quite a bit. He's changed his positions on that, which has been interesting to see. My favorite of like those original four horsemen, if I have to say a favorite, it's Hitchens. I just think Hitchens was wildly entertaining. And also, I think Hitchens was just the mind that couldn't be matched in that group. All of these people are really brilliant. Like Sam Harris is, a neuroscientist. It's like he's an interesting guy. Richard Dawkins is probably the most accomplished of them, but I think probably the least effective debater. But he is the most accomplished of them, like for like having achieved some pretty big things in science and philosophy. Harris is up there, but like, yeah, I don't know what it is about Hitch. I think Hitch was one in a million, Okay, so and Hitch was just like no one had the wit of like I know a few people like there's like on the theist end, C.S. Lewis would be a guy who had the mind that fired at a level that Hitchens' mind was firing, where it's like quick wit, funny. It's like that perfect balance of like intellect, humor, and genius. And it's like it just doesn't happen often, and you know it when you see it. Like you always know it when you see it. There's always like this perfect mix. I don't think Sam Harris has that, but I think Sam Harris is a very smart logician. So I'll give him that. He's probably on a logician level. Like I've seen him get owned in debates, and I've seen him fail to kind of make logical reasoning. And he definitely has a few premises that he cannot back. But in general, Sam Harris is really methodical and really good at kind of building a logical thread that holds up. Even if you disagree with it, like he's really good at like I said, like setting up the legs of the table to where it's like, even if you don't agree with the table, it does stand. Like, which is a big part of debate is like, you can make a logical premise where all like point A, B, C, all this underlying structures that get you to the end are logical and sound. Like it's sound reasoning. That's the first step of a debate is like, is the reasoning sound? Are the supporting facts there? That's like first level. Like if you're not there, like you're going to get destroyed in a debate. But the heavier debates are where you have conflicting ideas, but the reasoning is sound in both and the legs are there. So then it becomes like a comparison game of like choice, because like it's not like they're irrational. They're just opposing views. Those are the really heavy, interesting ones. Okay. Oh, Adam said Carl Sagan. I'll give him a lot of credit too. Carl Sagan's fascinating. Okay.
And asked me for my advice. And I didn't have time to read it. I just told you, no, I'm sorry. I can't. I don't have time. And then when the book came out, I read it and said, "Oh, I forgot that we'd had that exchange. I said, I wish you'd showed it to me because I think you made some big mistakes here, and I would love to have tried to talk you out of them. Too late." And then time passed, and then we had you said you wanted me still to say what I thought the mistakes were, and that's when I wrote my piece for your blog and for Naturalism, and it certainly struck you wrong, and I guess I regret a few bits of tone there, but I think everything I said there is defensible, and in particular, I did use Rappaport's rules. Contrary to what you say, if you look at the first paragraph of my piece, I applaud the book for doing a wonderful, clear job of setting out a position which I largely agreed with. And then I said you went off the rails a little later. So I did try to articulate your view, and I haven't heard you complain about that articulation of your view. And I said what we agree about, and I even said what I've learned from that book. So I did follow Rappaport's rules quite well, but we can just set that aside if you want and get down to what remains of the issue.
So to be fair, like this is something I found on YouTube. There are thinkers that I'm pretty sure. I'll be so disappointed if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Harris is like one of the most outspoken determinists with a pretty solid reasoning behind it that's around. So I thought that would be a good juxtaposition to kind of the more kind of middle of the road conclusion that the last person we watched on this was, because I thought we need to hear like a solid case for like hardcore determinism. And I think Harris will be making that. I haven't watched this, and also I have no idea what conflict they're talking about in full disclosure, because that's something I haven't seen or experienced or anything like that. So I just wanted you to know, like, I'd love to like chime in and be like, oh, okay, they're referring to like this certain conflict. I mean, other than what they just described, I cannot add context to that. Let's continue.
One thing in particular, which I know it came off awfully preachy, but I really think it was most unwise of you to declare that my position sounded like religion, sounded like theology. You have to know that you're insulting me, and that was a pretty deliberate insult, and that was in the book. And I thought, come on, Sam. So you can't expect kid gloves. If you're going to call me a theologian, then I'm going to call you on it and say, as I said, I tell my students, when a view by a apparently senior, an author worth reading looks that bad, maybe you've misinterpreted it. And of course, the main point of my essay was, yes, you have misconstrued my brand of compatibilism. You've got a sort of a caricatured version of it. And in fact,
Okay, so this is interesting. I didn't know this about Daniel Dennett because I'm less familiar with Dennett. Oh, Chris Calgia said, determinism is my favorite type of time travel story. For sure. So this will be really good, actually, as a follow-up to the last one I listened to, because I'm less familiar with Daniel Dennett. I know he's smart, but I'm less familiar with him. And he is more in the realm of, at least on the sense of like the way he's approaching determinism, it sounds like he's probably more in agreement with the person we listened to last time. So now we're going to get to watch an exchange with somebody who believes probably very similarly to the woman that we were watching a couple days ago talk about determinism. And then we're going to watch Harris, who's like a very hardcore determinist, grapple with that. And so I actually think this is a really good juxtaposition with the last thing we commented on, and maybe we'll learn something in this exchange. So now that it's being set up this way, it's going to be really interesting to see these play out.
I say late in the piece, you are a compatibilist in all but name. You and I agree on so many things. You agree with me that determinism and moral responsibility are compatible.
Are
Do you
they?
agree that a system of law, including punishment and justified punishment, is compatible with determinism?
How?
We're just that close to compatibilism. I've actually toyed with the idea, in part provoked by you and some others, Jerry Coyne and others, to say, all right, I don't want to fight over.
Sorry, so I want to throw out there also that lady we listened last time to was more of a compatibilist from what it sounded like. And so it's, again, this is going to get really interesting. Okay.
Over who gets to define the term free will. As I see it, there are two completely in tension themes out there about what free will is. One is that it's incompatible with determinism, and the other is that it's the basis of moral responsibility. I think it's the second one that's the important one. That's the variety of free will worth wanting. And I think the other one's a throwaway. And I agree with you. Indeterminist free will, libertarian free will is a philosopher's fantasy. It is not worth it. It's just a fantasy. So we agree on so much. We have no love for libertarian indeterminism, for agent causation, for all of that metaphysical gobbledygook. We're both good naturalists. And we both agree that the truths of neuroscience and the truths of physics doesn't have much to do with it, actually, are compatible with most of our understanding, our everyday understanding of responsibility, taking responsibility, being morally responsible enough to be held to our word. I mean, you and I both agree that you are competent to sign a contract. Me too. Well, you know, if you go and sign a deed or a mortgage, very often, if it's notarized, the notary public will say, "Are you signing this of your own free will?" And I recently did. I said, "Yeah, I am." That's the sense of free will that I think is important. I have it. There are a lot of people that don't have that free will, and it has nothing to do with indeterminism. It has to do with their being disabled in some way. They don't have a well-running nervous system, which you need if you're going to be a responsible agent. I think you agree with all of that.
So I certainly agree with most of that. I think there's some interesting points of disagreement on.
I'm going to pause here and just mention that there's a cadence that Adam Lohr has that is very Sam Harris-esque. It's like Adam Lohr is like the deeper voiced version of Sam Harris, like tone-wise. Adam, if that sounds insulting, it's not meant as one. It's just funny. I just noticed that. I was like, he kind of sounds a bit like Adam. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that before. He sounds like a higher pitched voice, but tonally, like cadence wise, tempo wise, like very Adam Lohr-esque. But Adam's just got a much deeper voice. That's interesting. What do you think about that, Adam? All right, let's continue.
The moral responsibility issue, which we should talk about, and I think that could be very interesting for listeners for us to unpack those differences. I am, needless to say, very uncomfortable with the idea that I have misrepresented your view. And if I did that in my book, I certainly want to correct that here. So we should clearly state what your view is.
By the way, in the intellectual world, like, it's so funny. So, a lot of us will get used to these like blood sport debates where it's take no prisoners. It's like internet debate type stuff. This is more like how a very heated debate goes in like academia, where it's like, I dare say, sir, I do take slight offense to the assertion and the falsity with which you are painting my position, and that made me slightly irritated at the audacity that you had with which to post your blog. And then the response is, sir, you are not painting that position correctly. And it's like this weird but in the meantime, like they're both like loading their guns in their like under the table. and anyhow, sorry, that's the visual I have right now, because actually it is funny. Even though they're being very civil, they're pissed at each other. You got to tell. It's like one of them like kind of took a pot shot in a blog, and then the other took a pot shot in their book, and both were kind of offended by each other. So it's interesting hearing them being very civil, but there is some there is some academic anger behind what they're saying. It's very funny.
At a certain point here. But I want to step back for a second before we dive into the details of the philosophy of free will. What I was aware of doing in my book, Free Will, and again, I would recommend that our listeners just go back and you don't actually have to read my book, but you can read Dan's review of it on my blog, and you can read my response, which is entitled "The Marionette's Lament," I believe. Then you can see the bad blood that was generated there. And I don't know if, Dan, if you're aware of this, you don't squander as much of your time on social media or in your inbox, but I heard from so many of our mutual readers that they were just despairing of that contretemps between us. It was like, mom and dad fighting, and it was totally unpleasant. So the thing that I really regret, which you regret that you didn't get a chance to read my book before I published it, which that would have been a nice thing for both of us. But what I regret is when you told me that you were planning to write a review of it, I kept urging you and ultimately, badgering you to not do that and have a discussion with me, because I knew what was going to happen, at least from my point of view, is that you would hit me with this 10,000 word volley, which in many, a dozen points or more, I would feel you had misconstrued me or gone off the rails, and there would be no chance to respond to those. And to respond in a further 10,000 word volley in a piecemeal way would just lead to this exchange that was very boring to read and yielded a much bigger sense of disagreement than what was necessary, right? So if I have to spend 90% of my energy taking...
I love it. Yeah, that's a good point, Adam. Speaking calmly and seething with contempt underneath. Yeah, there's like, it's like so calm, but there's just this like bubbling rage behind it, where it's like, oh, of all the guys in this circle, he's the most likely to just snap and kill someone. Yeah, definitely that kind of calm, where it's like, that's not calm, but it is calm. Like, it's very interesting. Okay, let's continue. Hopefully they actually talk about determinism and not just they're beefing. It's like right now it's a discussion or a debate about, hey guys, we debated in the past and I was offended when we got here. Yeah, I was offended when we got here. Well, I encourage people to really look into it. Again, kind of interesting, but let's talk determinism, guys.
Taking your words out of my mouth, then this thing begins to look purely adversarial. So one thing I've been struggling for in my professional life is a way of having conversations like this, even ones where there's much less goodwill than you and I have for one another, because you and I are friends and we're on the same side of most of these debates. And so we should be able to have this kind of conversation in a way that's productive. But I've been engaging people who, think I'm a racist bigot as a starting point, and I want to find ways of having conversations in real time where you can be as nimble as possible in diffusing unnecessary conflict or misunderstanding. And writing is an especially bad way to do that. Certainly writing the 10,000 word New York Review of Books piece that then someone has to react to in an angry letter, So in any case, I wish we'd had that conversation, but we're having it now, and this is instructive in its own way. Feel free to react to that, but I guess I want you to also express what compatibilism means to you. And if you recall the way in which I got that wrong, feel free to say that, but I'll then react to your version of compatibilism.
Well, my view of compatibilism is pretty much what...
Okay, so I want to point out, like, and you'll see this with any decent debater. You'll see, like, if I tried debate, it wouldn't really probably be this structured. They've done a couple really important things. Like, one is they're kind of setting a tone and setting the expectations for the debate and what exactly is going to go down. Two is they've started with definitions, which again is like a really formal, smart academic thing to do. Quite often, a lot of debates get derailed because somebody's definition of something is entirely different than than your definition. And so being unable to even agree on what definitions you're talking about when you're saying words is important. So if Harris was like a less experienced debater, I'm just complimenting the form here. If he were less experienced, he might just go in on compatibilism. But that's not quite giving the opportunity for Daniel Dennett to like actually articulate his view of compatibilism, because there might be a generic view that a lot of people who believe in compatibilism have, but it's giving him the opportunity to define it. So he, like, before countering it, he's allowing him space to define it. And that is really important, I think, for like a civilized debate or discussion, and also for like an interesting debate, because, watching somebody just yell at a straw man for 10 hours is not quite as fun as like watching somebody like really like, set up a steel man and then like really give a good position or a good argument against it. So kudos. Okay, let's continue.
I just said, and you were nodding, and you were not considering that a serious view about free will, although you were actually almost all of it you were agreeing with, and you also, I think, made this serious strategic or tactical error of saying this is like theology. It smells of theology. Well, as soon as you said that, I thought, well, you just don't understand what compatibilism is. It's the opposite of theology. It's a...
Sorry, I want to pause and just note that it's funny to me that like why like the ultimate insult to an atheist is like, that sounds kind of religious or theological. Which, by the way, it's going to be hard to have a discussion about free will versus predestination. In theory, that's kind of what you're discussing. Before the philosophy was talking about determinism and compatibilism, there were other words for the same discussion that's pretty old in philosophy, and it literally is this predestined, is this pre-assigned, or do we have choice? And there's just different terms and a little bit of evolution on the thinking, but it is an age-old thing that it's going to be hard not to draw comparisons to theology on these things. But anyhow, let's continue.
Attempt to look at what matters, to look at the terms and their meanings, and to recognize that sometimes ancient ideology gets in the way of clear thinking, so that you can't just trust tradition. If you trusted tradition and the everyday meanings of words, we would have to say all sorts of silly things. We've learned. In fact, one of the abiding themes in my work is there are these tactical or diplomatic choice points. You can say, consciousness exists. It just isn't what you think it is. Or you can say, no, consciousness doesn't exist. Well, if you've got one view of consciousness, if it's this mysterious, magical, ultimately insoluble problem, then I agree, consciousness in that sense doesn't exist. But there's another sense, much more presentable, I think, which of course consciousness exists. It just isn't what you think it is. That was a central theme in Elbow Room with regard to free will, and in Consciousness Explained with regard to consciousness. My view, my tactic, and notice, those two views, they look as if they're doctrinally opposed. They're not. They're two different ways of dealing with the same issue. Does free will really exist? Well, if free will means what Dennett says it means, yes. And you agree. If it means what some people think, then the answer is no.
Yeah, I understand that, but I would put to you the question, there is a difference between explaining something and changing the subject. So this is my gripe about compatibilism, and this is something we'll get into. So, I assume you will admit that there is a difference between purifying a real phenomenon of its folk psychological baggage, which I think this is what you think compatibilism is doing, and actually failing to interact with some core features that are just ineliminable from the concept itself.
Let me surprise you by saying,
Okay, so I want to translate some of the heresicisms just in case they're not coming across. I think what he's getting at is he's basically saying like compatibilism. He's kind of driving at the idea that compatibilists might be, in a sense, like trying to purify the idea of determinism, of its failures, or like of preconceptions that people might have regarding determinism. It's like a refinement of that. But you're saying in that refining process, right? You're kind of, he's saying, could you not be also kind of avoiding some of the inevitable logical, some of the inevitable questions that will be begged by even taking on the assumption of a deterministic structure. So I tried to boil that down more simply, and now I'm realizing Harris has actually boiled it down as simply as, as probably possible, because I think I overcomplicated it. But that's an interesting thing. He's basically saying like, hey, in doing this, are you not kind of setting up a system where you can dodge some of the heavier questions that somebody who's claiming determinism has to grapple with, which is interesting. So we'll see what the response is, but I think that was a interesting take on compatibilism.
I don't think there's a sharp line between those two. And I think that's quite obvious. That whether I'm changing the subject, I mean, I'm so used to that retort about any line along this. So, no, I think that's just a debater's point. We should just set that aside. Saying you're just changing the subject is a way of, we're declaring a whole manifold, a whole variety, spectrum of clarificatory views, which you're not accepting because you're clinging to some core part of what free will is. You want to claim that free will, the core of free will, is its denial of determinism. And I've made a career saying that's not the core. In fact, let me try a new line on you, because I've been thinking, why doesn't he see this the way I see it? And I think that the big source, the likely big source of confusion about this, is that when people think about freedom in the context of free will, they're ignoring a very good and legitimate notion of freedom, which is basically the engineering notion of freedom when you talk about degrees of freedom. My arms, my wrist and my shoulder and my elbow, those joints, there's 3 degrees of freedom right there. And in control theory, it's all about how you control the degrees of freedom. And if we look around the world, we can see that some things have basically no degrees of freedom, that rock over there, and some things, like you and me, have uncountably many degrees of freedom because of the versatility of our minds, the capacity that we can be moved by reasons on any topic at all. This gives us a complexity from the point of view of control theory, which is completely absent in any other creature.
Okay, let's pause here, guys. I am digging this. I think I'll listen to this for a little bit longer. I may not be able to get to the whole thing, which is kind of a shame because it sounds super meaty and interesting. So we'll go through as much of it as possible. But I wanted to highlight a few things. One, we're heading towards the 2-hour mark, and so it's about that time to play a trailer. Also, it's a good time for me to stand up and stretch because we finished one of our goals already. This page is entirely toned. So now I have to kind of measure. I think I'm going to probably do a little bit of flat colors. But I think that I also might kind of potentially maybe play a game of Risk. But I kind of want to keep going on this because it is really interesting and juicy. So, and also because it's interesting and juicy, maybe it'll get me further on my page than I initially thought I'd get. So what I'm going to do is, before we kind of play a trailer, I'm going to go ahead and set everything up so that we're good to go. I'm pulling up page 71 so that we can turn off the value layer, and then we can pull colors from the previous page so that we're being consistent with the color palette, and have everything set up so that when I leave to step out for a second to refill my beverage and so on, like we'll be able to kind of get back into this because this is really interesting. And I hope it's interesting for you guys. It's very fascinating to me. So while we're like heading out, I think I will play the another trailer. Here it is.
Hi, my name's Chris and I like comics. I want to talk about this comic for a second here. I just got this in. I ordered it direct from my local comic shop through Diamond Distributing. It's Joshua Kemble's Jacob's Apartment. I really enjoyed this book. There's all kinds of comics out there, let's be honest. There's fun comics, there's superhero comics, there's young adult comics, there's adventure comics for kids. There's so many different things under the planet. But there's also an entire subgenre of alternative books. Real life, real world depictions in comic book form. Situations that happen to each and every one of us. And this is a fine example of that. If you get a chance, order this book from your local comic shop. You won't be disappointed. I can't sing its praises high enough. Okay? Check it out. Jacob's Apartment by Joshua Kemble.
Okay, that was really nice of Christopher Runciman to have submitted that. And also, Christopher Runciman has a really inspiring art channel. I also want to say he also had his wife review Jacob's Apartment. She gave a really good review of it. It was really interesting. She found it fascinating, and that was really flattering as well. So thanks to both Christopher and his wife for those reviews and for getting my book and checking it out. And also, you guys should be subscribed to Christopher's channel just out of interest in general. He's doing these like one-page comics based on prompts that people suggest during live streams, which is like a great idea. And he's one of the most prolific artists in our circle because he knocks out like a page a day, which is way better than I can do for speed. And they don't look speedy; they look pretty polished and good. He's a killer artist, so check him out. So here's the plan. I'm like kind of gauging my brain and where it's at because I am starting to feel a little like wonky. So but I am enjoying this and I'm enjoying chat and all of this stuff. Chris said, I've gotten used to drawing on an iPad in the dark. I think I got to escape to the kitchen to actually do some classic inking with lights on. Nice. Classic inking would be rad. So I'm getting some productivity out of this. Hopefully you guys are too. So I'm going to continue the content for a little bit. We're going to listen to Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett a little longer on determinism versus compatibilism. I always say that wrong because it almost sounds like cannibalism. But anyhow, we're going to continue this and kind of continue learning and discussing and commenting on it. And then hopefully getting some art done in the meantime and getting our brains going while our art's going, which is the best thing, having that rational brain on fire and then at the same time having that art brain on fire. It's like the two just feed each other beautifully, at least for me. And so hopefully it's doing that for you guys. So we'll continue this. I'm going to at minimum color one panel, maybe two. And then we'll close out with a game of Risk. So we probably won't be able to watch this entire discussion, but we'll watch quite a bit of it. And if you guys also, after the fact, are curious to do watch the rest of this, it's Sam Harris versus Daniel Dennett free will debate on YouTube. So, okay, we're gonna continue it and make some art. And then again, I'm really excited because I also am going to try to sneak in a game of Risk all before 2. All right, let's do this.
And that kind of freedom is actually, I claim, at the heart of our understanding of free will, because it's that complexity which is not...
Ooh, sorry for cutting them off, but Adam made a really good point. He said, I love how careful they are about how they word their responses. I do too. I think this is just a sign of anybody who's somewhat decent at very formal debate. you'll notice that like words really matter, phrasing really matters, and so because of that, they're very careful with their words and intentional with their words, and that, like, even if you disagree with the words, you have to admire the intentionality with which these two are speaking. It's really it's kind of refreshing to hear. You don't hear it that often.
Not just complexity, but it's the competence to control that complexity. That's what free will is. What you want, if you've got free will, is the capacity, and it'll never be perfect, to respond to the circumstances with all the degrees of freedom you need to do what you think would be really the right thing to do. You may not always do the right thing, but let's take a dead simple case. Imagine writing a chess program which stupidly, it was written wrong so that the king could only move forward or back or left or right like a rook, and it could not move diagonally. And this was somehow hidden in it so that it just never even considered diagonal moves by the king. Completely disabled chess program. It's missing a very important degree of freedom, which it should have and be able to control and recognize when to use and so forth. What you want, let me ask you a question about what would be ideal from the point of view of responsibility. What does an ideal responsible agent have? Not mainly true beliefs, a well-ordered set of desires, the cognitive adroitness to change one's attention, to change one's mind, to be moved by reasons, the capacity to listen to reasons.
Let me pause here and just say, while I may not agree with Daniel Dennett on everything, I think I have to highlight that the ability to change your mind is so important. I was on a podcast that I really enjoyed. I think Luke stopped doing it, but he had me on a podcast to talk about me changing my mind, and it was one of the most awesome interviews I've ever done. And it was called Change My Mind, or I think it was Change My Mind with Luke T. Harrington. And the whole premise of the podcast was to talk to people of all kinds, of all philosophies, of all thoughts, of all kinds of arts, just people in general, and have a real deep discussion of an important thing that somebody changed their mind about. And it was one of the most refreshing things I've ever heard in my life. Like, that podcast was one of my favorite podcasts because it's a whole bunch of people talking about things weighty, from like changing their philosophy to changing their eating, to changing their mind about an assumption, to changing their mind about commas in sentences. Like, it was one of the most interesting podcasts because people would really get into like what changed their mind, what happened in result of them changing their mind, and stuff like that. So I just wanted to highlight, I think that is a really valuable and important part of freedom, is the idea to be able to change your mind if you're presented with reason. So, and I think it's really enriching. Okay, let's continue.
Capacity for some self-control. These things all come in degrees, but our model of a responsible adult, someone you would trust, someone you would make a promise to, or that you would accept a promise from, is somebody with all those degrees of freedom and control of them. Now, what removes freedom from somebody is if either the degrees of freedom don't exist, they're blocked mechanically, or some other agent has usurped them and has taken over control. A marionette and a puppeteer. And so I think that our model of a free agent says nothing at all about indeterminism. We can distinguish free agents from unfree agents in a deterministic world or in an indeterministic world. Determinism and indeterminism make no difference to that categorization.
Okay, I hate to side with Harris here, but Daniel Dennett is sounding... I think what he took offense to was that Harris as this is playing out, I'm already thinking, wow, I think Harris might have called this right in his response, because Daniel Dennett is sounding an awful lot like a theologian here. Okay, let's continue.
And it's that categorization which makes the moral difference.
So, yeah, I agree with almost all of that. I just need to put a few more pieces in play here. I think there is an important difference. Nevertheless, I agree that there is no bright line between changing the subject and actually purifying a concept of illusions and actually explaining something scientifically about the world. But in this case, the durability of free will as a problem for philosophers and now scientists is based on people's first-person experience of something they think they have. People feel like they are the authors of their thoughts and intentions and actions. And so there's a first-person description of this problem, and there's a third-person description of this problem. And I think if we bounce between the two without knowing that we're bouncing between the two, we are losing sight of important details. So people feel that they have libertarian free will. And when I get emails from people who are psychologically destabilized by my argument that free will doesn't exist, these are people who feel like something integral to their psychological life and well-being is being put in jeopardy. And I can say this from both sides because I know what it's like to feel that I could have done otherwise. So let me just, for listeners who aren't totally up to speed here, libertarian free will is anchored to this notion of I could have done otherwise. So if we rewound the universe to precisely as it was a few moments ago, I could complete this sentence differently than I did. You know, whether you throw indeterminism or determinism or some combination thereof, there is no scientific rationale for that claim. If you rewound the universe to precisely its prior state with all relevant variables intact, whether deterministic or indeterministic, these words would come out of my mouth in exactly the same order, and there would be no change. I would speak this sentence a trillion times in a row with its errors, with its glitches. So people feel that if they rewound the movie of their lives, they could do differently in each moment. And that feeling is the thing that is what people find so interesting about this notion that free will doesn't exist, because it is so counterintuitive psychologically. Now, I can tell you that I no longer feel that. Subjectively, my experience of myself, I'm aware of the fact that it is a subjective mystery to me how these words come out of my mouth. It's like I'm hearing these words as you're hearing these words, right? I'm thinking out loud right now. I haven't thought this thought before I thought it, right? It's just coming. And I am subjectively aware of the fact that this is all coming out of the darkness of my unconscious mind in some sense. There's the sphere of my mind that is illuminated by consciousness, for lack of a better word. And I can be subjectively identified with it. But then there's all the stuff that is simply just appearing in consciousness, the contents of consciousness, which I can't notice until I notice them. And I can't think the thought before I think it. And my direct experience is compatible with a purely deterministic world. Right now, most people's isn't, or they don't think it is. And so that's where when you change the subject. So the analogy I used in my article that responded to your review, which I still think captures it for me, I'll just pitch it to you once more, is the notion of Atlantis. So people are infatuated with this idea of Atlantis. I say, actually, Atlantis doesn't exist. It's a myth. There's nothing in the world that answers to the name of Atlantis. There was no underwater kingdom with advanced technology and all the rest. And whoever it was, Plato, was confused on this topic, or just spinning a yarn. And compatibilism, your variant, and perhaps every variant, takes another approach. It says, no, actually, there is something that conserves much of what people are concerned with about Atlantis. And in fact, it may be the historical and geographical antecedent to the first stirrings of this idea of Atlantis. And there's this island of Sicily, the biggest island in the Mediterranean, which answers to much of what people care about with Atlantis. And I say, well, but actually what people really care about is the underwater kingdom with the advanced technology. And that is a fiction. So you and I are going to agree about Sicily. 99% of our truth claims about Sicily are going to converge. But I'm saying the whole reason why we're talking about Atlantis in the first place is there's this other piece that people are attached to, which by you purifying the subject, you're actually just no longer interacting with that subjective piece.
Oh my gosh, Harris, man, I've heard Harris get trounced in debates before, and again, like Harris is really articulate. Like again, he gets trounced way less than I would in a debate, but he is so on point with what he's pointing out about compatibilism that I haven't even been able to articulate or think about, and even thinking back to that woman's lecture, that did seem like a kind of weird way out of the free will question, because it was like, well, actually there's all these different things that are important for free will to exist, and so if we just kind of redefine free will as these things, then you can have that in determinism and the both can kind of exist. And Harris is this analogy of Atlantis is like kind of highlighting that kind of flaw, because yes, if you change the definition that everyone's meaning when they're saying free will, then yes, you can have your cake and eat it too, but you're just changing the cake, right? Like you're changing, like that's a really good point by Harris, where it's like you can't just kind of that's interesting. I'm curious what the response will be, but he's basically saying like I'm not going to disagree that this other cake I can have and eat too, but we're talking about different cakes, right? Like I don't know. I'm doing a worse job than Harris, but my point is it's just fascinating. That's a good point about Atlantis, because it's like, yeah, now that I'm like thinking about it, like how do you get away with that? Because like people are talking about pure free agency, not pre-written law, and like how do you get around that? This has always been an issue for theologians, right? When it comes to like biblical truth and predestination versus choice, because obviously like the whole Christian faith is based on a choice that you are clearly, the Bible is like saying you can make, but then also the Bible's very explicit about everything's pre-written. Everyone who comes to belief is pre-selected. So how do you deal with that conflict, right? It's been like, that's been an old as time discussion that's existed in circles of Christianity, and also especially in like atheism versus Christian discussions, right? Because that's a clear contradiction in the Bible that scholars have to deal with. Like if they think the Bible's true, like they have to address those things. The worst way to address those things would be to be like, well, I mean, technically, it's kind of the same, even though it is contradictory. But if you kind of reorient it and redefine what we all mean when we talk about contradictions, then it's not a contradiction. It's like, so I can kind of see where Harris is flustered with Dennett, because Dennett does have a problem here that Harris is very well placing on his lap, which is like, yeah, you can't kind of just redefine free will and say, well, this kind of fulfills that problem. That's not solving the math problem. That's making a new math problem. And so that Atlantis thing, at least for me, was really helpful, because it kind of, now I'm understanding why Harris is frustrated with Dennett. Again, we're watching this. I don't necessarily agree with any of these guys. I'm just, it's interesting to hear them. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah, that's well put. I think the analogy is let's instructive. I don't think it's entirely fair, but let's leave it at that.
Don't leave it.
Your position is that you can see very clearly that what people really care about is that free will should be something sort of magical. And you're right, a lot of people, that's what they, if you don't think free will is magical, then you don't believe in free will. And that's what I confront them and say, well, I got something which isn't magical, which is perfectly consistent with naturalism and gives us moral responsibility, justification for the way we treat each other, the distinctions that matter to us, like who do we hold responsible and who don't, who do we excuse because they don't have free will. It gives us all of the landmarks of our daily lives and explains why these are what matters. And indeed, though, if the mystery, if the magic is that important to people, I agree with you. That magic doesn't exist, and if we're going to tie free will to that, then I would say no, free will doesn't exist. Now, you said something very interesting. You said that the reason people believe in this is because they feel it, or they think they do. They sort of intuit they could have done something different in exactly the same situation. I agree with you that that's what they think. But I don't think that it is a forlorn task to show them that that's not really what they should think about this, about the very feelings they have.
Vic is joining us and said, I have awoken. Nice. Then it's articulating his position in an interesting way, too. Although he's still kind of making the argument. Like, he's kind of responding to Harris by doing exactly what Harris was critiquing him for doing. But just trying to kind of justify it. It's interesting. Okay, let's continue.
Their sense that they are, as Kant says, acting under the idea of freedom. That's right. They are. And that's the only way an agent can be. This is a fairly deep point, that an agent has to consider some things fixed and some things not fixed. You can't decide. Otherwise, the whole setting of decision-making depends on there being that kind of freedom. And so it's no wonder, in a way, that people who are impressed with that decide that what they experience is a sense of utter freedom. They don't need utter freedom.
Yeah, Adam's right, dead on. He's saying Dennett, the philosopher, is talking about the least philosophical sense of the term free will. Exactly. It's like saying, well, I mean, technically, when you program an algorithm, it needs to have some parameters that are fixed and some amount of flexibility within it. And so that algorithm needs a little bit of free will. And like nobody on earth is going to be like, oh, we've gotten to the point where algorithms have free will. We haven't gotten there at all. But by his definition, you could say an algorithm or AI at this point currently, like by what he's defining as free will, you could say AI has free will at this point, full free will, according to Daniel Dennett's definition of what free will is. Most neuroscientists and like AI people would not say we're there. They'd say we're getting closer, but they wouldn't say we're there. They wouldn't say there's free will. They would say there's a program that has parameters that allow a variety of randomness and result. But that doesn't mean that the program itself is sentient and free. That's the leap. That's the Atlantis that Harris is trying to point out about Dennett. So that's a very keen point, Adam. Vic said, I'm going to pass out again. Have a good night, day, etc., boys. Awesome. Thanks for stopping by, Vic. I appreciate it. Okay, let's continue.
What they need and can have is the sense that in many very similar circumstances which differed maybe only in a few atoms, they would have made another decision. And that has not, as soon as you allow any tiny change when you rewind the tape, the whole business about determinism falls out of the picture. And that's why in actually several places, I've gone to considerable length, probably too long, to trot out examples where we have a decision maker, which is in a demonstrably deterministic world. It's playing chess, and it loses the game, and its designer says, well, it could have castled. What do you mean it could have castled? What the designer means is it was just the luck of the draw. A chess program, like any complicated program, is going to consult a random number generator or a pseudo-random number generator at various points. And this time it chose wrong. However, it chose wrong because when it got a number from the pseudo-random number generator, it got a 1 rather than a 0. Flip a single bit and it would have made the other choice. In other words, it's not a design flaw. An agent could be, as it were, impeccably designed. You couldn't improve the design of the agent. So that's what justifies saying, yeah, I could have done otherwise. Half the time or more, it would have done otherwise. This is just bad luck on this occasion. Normally, it would have done otherwise.
So I
Okay,
agree.
so let's pause. You know what's funny? Then it just dug in twice. It's funny because before even watching that part, had mentioned it's kind of like saying an AI program or an algorithm has sentient free will. And then he literally just pretty much said that. Whereas, like, I mean, one could make the argument that like a programmer could look at like a random number generator that's programmed and been like, well, it just was like did a different thing, but it could have at another time it could have done something different, which is nonsense because it's a program. It's going to react in the exact way it reacted, and the randomness is a simulation because it's still bound by parameters set by the programmer. That's not free will. But then it's now saying like, well, the chess program's got free will, but no. Okay, let's continue. That's interesting. I'm wondering where Harris goes with this. Does he pin him to that?
With all that, I think you're not acknowledging, however, how seditious that those facts are, how to the degree to which they undermine people's felt sense of their own personhood.
Yeah.
So if you tell me that but for a single charge at a synapse, I would have decided I didn't want to have this conversation with you, or I wouldn't have proposed to my wife, right? And my entire life would be different. Acknowledging the underlying neurophysiology of all of those choice points and how tiny a difference can be that makes the crucial difference, that suddenly brings back the marionette strings. Now, no one's holding the strings. The universe is holding the strings. But that is not what people feel themselves to be. This feeling that if you had had just one mouthful more of lunch, it's something very different. You would make a radically different decision 6 hours from now than you are going to make. That is a life that virtually no one feels they're living.
Oh, this is going in good directions. I think you're largely right and exactly wrong in what you just said. I think you're right that this is a subversive idea to many people. They're so used to the idea that unless they're completely, absolutely undetermined, then they don't have free will. Now, the trouble with that is, if you look closely at that idea, you see, if they were absolutely undetermined, that wouldn't give them free will either. So that's a red herring. So let's look at what does matter. It's interesting that you say that if I thought that some tiny atomic change would have altered the course of some big important life decision, let's look closely at that, because what I think we should say is it is indeed true that there are times when a decision is a real toss-up. When you've thought about it, you're going to have to act pretty soon, and you just can't make up your mind. In cases like that, and it may be something that's morally very important, the idea that when you do make the decision, had a few atoms been slightly...
Sorry, I'm going to pause here and just point out they also have... I know both of these thinkers, like I'm not as familiar with Daniel Dennett, but I know Sam Harris, one of his weaknesses is trying to justify a morality landscape philosophically. And him and Dawkins both have tried to intuit morality direct from science, like in a naturalistic viewpoint. And that becomes an exercise in futility quite often when I've heard them. And suddenly these very articulated, thought out, considered responses like we're seeing in this discussion start collapsing when they have a morality discussion. And even the definition of morality, they slip and struggle, which makes sense. And by the way, that is not making the stupid argument that a lot of theists make that like, it's like, well, you're just immoral if you're not a theist. That's just nonsense. But it's more like philosophically underpinning, like giving legs to the idea of a morality that can be agreed upon. Like it is a very hard task in the case of Harris and I think Dennett as well. So, but I've seen Harris really fumble or make like wild leaps when it comes to that. It's just interesting because even in these discussions, they have to pin it on morality, but morality becomes a really interesting conversation in these discussions too. So let's continue, because that is the big concern. Like the big concern of determinism is it undermines the sense of morality that most people have. Like the idea that as an agent, you make a bad decision that you're then held responsible for, right? Because we're responsible agents who can make a choice. But if your choice is predetermined and you don't have a choice, then can you be held responsible for the thing you always had to do? It's an interesting conversation. Okay,
different, you would have made the other decision. I don't find that upsetting at all. Because that's one of those situations. And it doesn't mean that when the evidence and the reasons are preponderantly on one side, no, then you'd have to make a very large change in the world for a different decision to come out. Sometimes the indeterminists, the libertarians, in fact, it's a sort of signature of a lot of their views, say that there has to be an absolutely undetermined choice of some importance that's somewhere in the causal chain of your life for your action to be responsible. Now, thus, I had long thrust into their faces the example of Luther, who says, "I can do no other."
I'm sorry. Again, I actually really admire the civility and the intelligence with which these people are, but I also have the mentality of a junior high kid every once in a while. And when you have an academic saying, I thrust this idea, I thrust this assertion, it's like saying, I schooled this guy. Like it's the academic version of like, man, I owned that guy, like owned, destroyed. Like I did thrust this idea upon thine enemies, and thine enemies fell before me in defeat. It's like, it's just kind of funny, but it's all, I mean, it is admirable, but it's funny hearing the kind of academies for fighting terms.
When he's not ducking responsibility. He's saying, believe me, it wasn't, had the light been different or the wind not been blowing, I would have. No, he's saying, I was determined to do this. And yet he's not saying it's not a free decision. Some of them, amazingly to me, fall for the bait and say, oh, well, that's only because it must have been the case that somewhere in Luther's life, there was a moment, it might have been in his childhood, when there were two paths, A and B, and he chose A, which led to him nailing the theses on the door. And at that moment, it was absolutely undetermined that he'd choose A. I think that's the craziest fantasy imaginable. It doesn't depend on that. So I agree with you that when we think about how chance, luck, enters into our lives, that can be very unsettling. And we should not hide from the fact that there are times when it's a toss-up, and we may rejoice in the decision we make, or we may bitterly regret it. And the fact that we couldn't do that, it was not in our control. Maybe it's a tragic fact, but it's not a fact which disables us for responsibility. You're playing chess.
Okay, so let's pause here. Do you guys see the contradiction there? I'm trying to parse this together. So he's basically saying, hey, just because somebody has to make a choice and it's really hard for them and it feels like they're making a choice, but they're basically predestined and determined to make the choice that they're going to make, then we can't hold them. That doesn't mean we can't hold them accountable for the choice that they had to make because of every circumstance around them. What? It's just interesting. Okay, let's continue.
To take a deliberately trivial case, you considering two possible moves, for the life of you can't see what the better one is. You sort of mentally flip a coin. You don't know. Works out great. You said, yeah, that's right. That's what you're very likely to retrospectively decorate that with the claim that that's what you determined. Nah, you're kidding yourself. You're just taking responsibility for a little bit of lucky random coin flip in your decision process. That does not, in fact, not only does that not disable you for free will, I think an important human point about free will is that free responsible agents recognize that when they act, they're going to be held responsible, whether or not they are in complete control of.
Okay, this is bizarre. They're going to be held responsible whether or not they're in complete control. But his whole point is they're not in complete control. Okay. Let's continue. Adam said Dennett is so intelligent, but he sounds totally oblivious on the subject. And that's bizarre because this is like one of his big subjects.
And they can't be in complete control of the decision-making that goes to making up their minds.
Well, now I think we're getting into some very interesting territory where we might actually disagree, because I think perhaps your notion of moral responsibility is something that I don't agree with. I think I can do a kind of compatibilist maneuver on moral responsibility and get most of what we want out of it. But I think something changes with my view of free will. But I want to unpack one point you made earlier that might have blown by people too quickly. The reason why indeterminism doesn't give you freedom is that if you made a choice that was truly not determined by your past conditioning, your past attitudes, it would be precisely the occasion where you would say, I don't know what came over me. It wouldn't be representative of who you've been up until that moment. So it has to be in part of the causal stream that you recognize to be, lawfully you in each moment. But I want to ask you one question before I talk about why I think it might all be a matter of luck all the way down, and that moral responsibility is something we have to redefine in the way that you are eager to redefine free will. I want to ask you this notion that the tiny micro adjustment in the universe only really spells the difference in cases where it's a decision that could go either way, that it was 50-50 anyway, and you just, you flipped a bit, and it wasn't a diversion of that great consequence because it was not something that you were fully committed to. But I think there probably are many actions, maybe decisions are the wrong category, but certainly actions where the difference between a life-changing action and not is just a matter of a tiny piece of real estate in the brain being otherwise. So the difference between thinking something and saying it out loud to the person you're thinking it about, or the difference between sending that angry email you wrote to your boss or to your best friend and just deciding to scrap it, that can be one of these tiny moments where, but for a little more sleep the night before, your life would be very different.
On that very point, imagine how many Brits there are today who didn't vote, and didn't vote for the most tiny and trivial reasons. They just, I think I'll just have another piece of toast instead. I don't really need to vote. And they're kicking themselves, of course, now. And life has those moments, and we factor that in when we consider what it is to be responsible. And some people do better on that sort of self-control than others. I think that regret plays a big role in our.
So bizarre though, because if you don't have control, how do you have self-control? That's okay. Okay, guys, we're gonna finish toning just this one panel, and honestly, it's getting pretty late, so I don't think we're gonna have time for a game of Risk. But I am starting to feel a little sleepy. I want to finish at least this. I'm enjoying this conversation, so we're gonna finish this panel real quick. Before I'm going to play one more trailer, I just ask that if you've watched this, if you've been enjoying it, hit that like button. I see those of you who haven't. It takes 2 seconds. You can determine that. So hit the like button while I play this trailer, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the stream and this panel. So, all right, here it is. We'll play the classic Jacob's Apartment trailer. Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around. At the seams that was the Jacob's Apartment trailer. If you like that song is actually available. And I believe that one's on the No Saboteurs Good Bees Don't Die album that my friend Josh and I released. And also, that book is available in bookstores everywhere. And also, it makes me want to close out with Adam Lohr's brilliant Joe Biden endorsement of Jacob's Apartment, in which Joe Biden attempts to sing that song. It's so funny. Oh man, that's another one of those things that just like, Adam, in full disclosure, I think the day you released that, I had like a really bad day, and I came home and I saw that on your YouTube, and it like made my day. It was the funniest, like it was so funny. Anyhow, so thank you for that, Adam. I'll have to try to play that maybe to close this out when we finish flatting this this. Although depending, because it's going kind of quick, maybe we will do Risk. Maybe we'll play one quick game. It all depends. Probably not, because once it hits 2, I gotta call it. 2 Pacific. Adam said, "I'm glad I brightened your day." You did. It was hilarious. It was very funny. That was the part that got me. Like initially, it was like, okay, this is pretty funny, but then when it's so kind of funny and surreal to have somebody make a Joe Biden like AI sing like very like do an approximation of a song I wrote. Is really funny. That was amazing. And very hilarious. So anyhow, if you guys haven't checked that out, even like let's say we hit 2:00 and we aren't able to play that, I encourage you guys to go to Adam Lohr's channel and check out the video Joe Biden endorses Jacob's apartment. It's very hilarious. Just thinking about it, that cracks me up. Okay, so you kind of just have to see it. Okay, we are getting there, guys. We have our but this is probably what's going to eat our time till 2. Oh, I need to press play on that video so that we can comment more, because it was really cool and I am in the zone of thinking about it. So what we're going to do here is get that going. But what's going to slow us down and probably make risk not a possibility tonight is I have to color all of those books on the bookshelf. So that's going to be the most time consuming thing. So let's continue. We're about 38 minutes into Sam Harris versus Daniel Dennett on free will. It's their free will debate. Okay.
Thinking about free will when we have done something that we bitterly regret and that we do view as that wasn't really what I, or at least the ideal I, would do. When we're ashamed of something we've done, we often hide behind second-rate ideas. I think that's part of the sort of emotional distortion, the waves of distortion that mean that we really can't take the folk notions at face value. They've got a lot of baggage on them.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's seeming to me at this moment that we have been talking past each other to some degree. So yeah, like, you decide to redefine free will. Here's the free will worth wanting, and then you talk about degrees of freedom and agents that can operate lawfully and meet their aims. Whereas I talk about free will being an incoherent concept. The libertarian notion of free will doesn't map onto determinism, it doesn't map onto indeterminism, and it doesn't map onto any combination thereof. And we both agree about that, but we have a different response to it. But I think...
What is your response?
Well, my response is that the free will you think you have doesn't exist. And then we can go on to talk about all these other things that we care about. But here's where I'm going to push into this area of moral responsibility where we may find a disagreement. So you take the classic case of Charles Whitman, the shooter in the clock tower, killing, I think, 14 people at the University of Texas, and one of the early and famous mass shootings in American history. And it turns out that he wrote this essentially suicide note saying, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I've been flying into a rage. And he killed his wife first before he went and killed all those other people. And he said, I don't know why I did this. I love my wife. You might want to do an autopsy on my brain after you kill me to find out what's wrong with me. And in fact, that's what was done. And they found I think it was a glioblastoma that was pressing on his amygdala. And it's just the sort of tumor in the sort of place where you think, okay, that there's something exculpatory about that, right? He was a victim of his biology. And that wasn't Charles Whitman shooting. That was Charles Whitman plus brain tumor shooting. So when that kind of case emerges in court, it affects our ethical notion of if he had survived and it was time to punish.
Okay, we got to pause here and just highlight, dude, Harris on point. Like, again, I don't fully agree with anybody on this discussion. I'm just talking about in realms of laying out an argument. Harris is on fire in this discussion. It's honestly, I have totally seen discussions where Harris is not on, and he's resorting to like some really weird things, but he is so on point in this discussion because right now he's gearing it towards responsibility and held accountability in the sense of somebody who's not a free agent making a decision, and how that changes our moral landscape and perception. This is really key point to bring him back on, because I think he might be right about Dennett dodging that. It's interesting.
punish him, we would have given him brain surgery had the surgery been available, and not put him in prison for the rest of his life, because he was yet another victim of this bad luck incident. Now, my argument in my book Free Will, which I think you don't agree with, is that a complete understanding of neurophysiology, should we ever attain it, is exculpatory in that same sense. That basically it is brain tumors all the way down. So if you can tell me that you fully understand the charge on that one synapse that led me to hit send on my email, as opposed to restraining myself, that charge is something which I didn't author. That charge is the tiniest brain tumor ever found, and that is the reason why I hit send.
Oh, that's very useful. Tom Wolfe has this passage where he says, what we've learned from neuroscience is that we're wired wrong. Don't blame me. Don't blame us. We're wired wrong. No, what neuroscience shows is we're wired. It doesn't show we're wired wrong. Some people, like poor Whitman, wired wrong. So what you're basically challenging me to say is, well, doesn't that mean that everybody's wired wrong?
Okay, now he's rephrasing Harris's thing, but unfortunately, we got to end the Harris thing. But fortunately, the stream is not over. I am going to play a game of Risk. I encourage you guys, if you enjoyed this, Sam Harris versus Daniel Dennett on Free Will debate. It's just called Sam Harris versus Daniel Dennett Free Will debate. That's what we've been watching and commenting on. It's super interesting. I hate stopping a discussion like that. Like the kind of autist in me wants to hear it all the way through and then dissect it and deep dive. But we'll either do a to be continued, and maybe we'll listen to more of this on a future stream. Or I also encourage, if you guys were interested in it and want to have your own kind of, playing with the ideas and the concepts, check this out and see what you think for yourself. So but we fulfilled our artistic obligations for the night. We got a little past the minimum of what I was hoping for. I was hoping to just get the page toned. What we have is one finished colored page. All the unflatted colors are just right now a placeholder of magenta, but we did get this done. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play the Joe Biden the Joe Biden endorsement. But I'm going to close this out. I'm going to close out. So we'll get everything set up before we play that trailer. Let's go ahead and get everything set up for Risk. And I very much appreciate you guys checking this out. So I'm going to save what I've got. We're going to go back to our full cam, our full screen. I'm going to save what I've got. And we're going to play that Joe Biden endorsement video. Do I want to hit don't save? Yes, because this is the page before. So I don't want to save changes that I didn't want to make on a page. Okay, so everything's saved. The other thing we've got to take care of, since we're going into Risk land pretty soon, is we need to change the lower third to our Risk lower third, which is always a hint if you're watching these streams and you enjoy Risk and you see this ticker show up. That means we're going to probably play Risk, which I'm so excited about. I'm such a nerd. And maybe we'll continue the deep dive on determinism at a future stream. I know that today also we have Artcasters, and I think it's going to be on my channel. I'm not sure who Scott is going to have. Maybe it's just us. But I think it's on my channel this time. But yeah, if not, make sure you're subscribed to the Artcasters mailing list too, so that later today in the evening when we have our Artcasters episode, you can check it out. That's going to do it for that content. And now we're going to get into playing one game of Risk preferably classic progressive. But before that, we're going to check out the aforementioned Joe Biden endorsement by Mr. Adam Lohr. And here it is. It's especially funny if you contrast it with the classic Jacob's Apartment trailer that I already played earlier, which now you guys know the context. So it hopefully I'm going to line it up. Okay, here we go.
I'm the President, Joe Biden, and I just want to say I endorse the comic book Jacob's Apartment by Joshua Kemble. It's a ghost world type book, a real ghost world book, and you can get it at Amazon.com. It's a sensation. It's taking the world by storm. And I just want to say thank you to Joshua. I just want to say thank you to Joshua Kemble. And I want to announce today that we're actually starting the Kemble Award for Outstanding Amazon Comic. So go check out Kemble. Thank you. Me splits clearly it seems, only in my dreams can I. There's split at the seams, and I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. Please go to Amazon.com.
That's amazing. Thank you again to Adam Lohr for slapping that together. Thank you to President Joe Biden for liking Jacob's Apartment. It took me quite a few years to do, so it means a lot to me that the President of the United States is a fan, and also spreading misinformation about the Kemble Award. But I and the Kremlin, which is the name that I am knighting all of our followers, all of the followers of my live stream are, whenever they listen to the live stream, members of the Kremlin, which is the followers of Kemble. Yeah, I and the Kremlin thank you honorably, Sir Joe Biden. Yeah, Chris was saying, LOL, the Biden serenade. It's the best. So you got to think, I'm having like a terrible day at work. This is a while ago. It wasn't like work's fault or anything. Like, it was just one of those days where you get in your car and like the gas is like empty, and then like you fill the gas and you go to fill the gas, but there's like no spots to fill your gas tank, and you're like, okay, and then you get on the freeway and it goes from like 60 to zero, and you're just sitting there and there's like hours of traffic. And you get out and you're like, it's freezing cold, and you're like, crap, I forgot my jacket. Like, it's one of those days where every single thing was that for the entire day. And so I was just like having a miserable day where everything was off, like, and firing off, and everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And then and oh, I love this joke by Chris. He said he got your name wrong, but I guess that's just how the cookie crumbles. That's right. Kremlin for life. But but anyhow, so I come home to that and I was like, okay, today's awesome. And it was that moment of serenade where I was like, okay, I can't have said this was a bad day, because that was hilarious. Anyhow, okay. Let's play some Risk. So we're going to play a quick game of Risk, and then we're going to wrap the stream. If you've enjoyed the stream so far, make sure you've hit that like button, that you're subscribed to my channel, and that you hit that bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. Yeah. If you have thoughts on determinism or like the stuff that I've talked about on this show, or even like the earlier topic that I was bringing up that I am now blanking out on. I think the topic was about suffering, and suffering possibly being a good thing in a lot of scenarios, and our life of comfort. If you have thoughts on any of those kind of subjects that were brought up, please comment. Your comments, I try to respond to every single one. We have a progressive game, you guys. It's 120 seconds. There's 4 people who've joined. It's a 6-person game. Hopefully it goes to all 6 people. Hopefully it fills pretty soon. I got a good 10 minutes for this thing to start. Progressive games, one of the reasons I've been playing progressive a little more is they go quicker. And that is me, Jordan the Snooty. All right, we got our game. We'll see what our position is as it comes, and I'll walk you through my steps on it. You'll notice that I'm at a higher level of expert mode, so I'm creeping closer to regaining master. That could change for the positive or the negative. If you're a determinist, it's all preset anyway. If you're a nihilist, you're like, well, what's the point of playing Risk anyway? And if you're a Kemble, you don't care either way. We're going to dominate this world. This world, right? Not the actual world, but this digital world. So blue is going for South America. Green is kind of spending more troops than they should. But they're going to consolidate in Africa. So they're going to try to expand out their stack in Africa and North America. This is progressive. It's different than fixed. Remember, progressive, your card bonuses exponentially increase each turn. And so when you have 3 cards that you can cash in, it starts with a 4-troop bonus that moves to 6. Then it moves to 8. Then it moves to 10. Then it moves to 15. Then it moves to 20. Then it moves to 30. And so this game starts very slow and it ends very quickly. And within a few moves, like about mid-game, you know who's going to win, roughly, or at least who has a really good shot at winning, because the exponential growth gives them exponential advantage, and they're able to usually clear out the board. So my goal in playing these games is usually to try to retain as many troops as I can, and that's just what I'm going to do. So I'm going to actually put my stack on my 7, so that if that 6 decides to hit a 5 or a 6, at least they pay a cost for it. And then I'm going to consolidate the only stack of troops that I have, other than that won't be cleared out on the next turn. I'm guessing my 2 will get eaten on the next turn, possibly this turn, because I think that if you're red right now, you're probably going to angle for Australia. And then Australia is potentially going to be in conflict with yellow. So red is kind of hesitant to lose those troops because they want to watch their back, because yellow might be an Australia, no win guy, and try to kind of fight it out for Australia. And they might end up in like a death match. We'll see how red responds. Blue is continuing to make their tirade, their sweep across North America. They're consolidating a little better. So they started really aggressive, and now they're kind of consolidating up. Not a bad tactic. My 3s are not going to be able to meet each other. I probably am going to lose those 3s. If there is a way that I can use those 3s to like at least attempt to get some utility out of them, and maybe get a card by making an attack, I will. But we'll just have to kind of see how it plays out. Right now, my best card collecting strategy is to build my stack and collect quite a bit of it in Africa. Not trying to take Africa, just using it as a position to build an army. Purple just building their stacks. Purple's playing pretty well. But at some point, they're going to need to consolidate into a big stack. Yellow is playing very haphazardly. I think yellow is definitely losing their fortification that they were trying for in Australia on the next turn. I would be a fool to build up anywhere else. So I'm going to build up this 4, so hopefully I don't lose that in a turn. And then I'm going to go ahead and make an attack to get a card up here, so I'm not losing troops where I'm a little more at threat with my bigger stack here with that 5. And then I feed green a card, which hopefully keeps some good faith between us, and consolidate my position to where I have a bigger stack. Right now, card turn-in's at 4. Nobody's in position to turn in yet. You usually don't want to be the first to turn in unless you absolutely have to. A tip with progressive too is you usually don't want to start clearing people out unless there's some crazy advantage you get from it early on, because quite often the cost of taking a player out for their cards, you're losing more in the exchange initially than you're gaining. When you want to start clearing people out is when you see the numbers, and like, let's say it's going to cost you 20 troops to take out 20 troops and take all their cards. That's when you want to make the big moves in progressive. It's a much more aggressive game than fixed. Like when you're playing fixed, it's very slow and methodical. And when you see grandmasters play fixed, they're very slow and methodical. When you see a grandmaster play progressive, you'll see these tiny stacks, and then you'll blink and it's like mid, like once you start getting like 30 bonuses, the board's dominated. They've taken out every player in like one turn. That's how kind of grandmasters that I've seen kind of play the progressive game. So it's a little different in strategy. Similar, but different. And it's less reliant on good politics and good neighbors, and it's way less reliant on owning continents. Because you can lose a lot of troops trying to defend borders and continents, trying to hold a continent to get like really mild troop bonuses. And what you want to be playing for is the long-term troop bonuses where you start getting like 30 to 50 troops per card cash in. Like your little 2 or 8 troops you're getting isn't going to make much of a difference at that point. It can be a game changer early on. Like red right now, by securing Australia, does have a massive advantage because now they're accruing troops without card turn-ins. So early in the game, that's going to make a big difference. But as the game goes later and later, those early advantages add up, but they aren't as significant as the card bonuses. So now it's like really kind of early on, I'm just trying to position myself in a way that I'm not going to get taken out very early in the game. But it is a tense game because quite often people will be in position to take you out. So it hinges on luck a little bit too. But a lot of it's your board positioning, making yourself very, very hard to kill. I think in this case, what I do is I add 1 here, and then I'm going to buff up my 6 a little bit so it's not tempting to kind of hit that 6. And maybe we move here so we're not opening that 4 to slam into us. I think this next turn, I think blue is going to consolidate South America when blue is able. Red is in a really solid position. Red is also in a position where by keeping that 2, they're kind of blocking green from taking any sort of aggressive action when green has a card turn in, because green has that 2 in the way. So their big stack 8 can't really mess with them. Yep, blue takes South America. I lose that 3 stack. There wasn't much I could do with it. The other 3 is kind of in that position too. I have to just abandon the three that I have in North America, because there's no world in which I buff that up unless I have a card turn in, and it somehow survives. I just kind of have to deal with the parting of those troops. So far, the lead right now is red. They are definitely getting an advantage by holding that continent. Red is 5th position. In 2nd is purple, who has just spread themselves across the board, which can be a tactic that can work. And then in 3rd, 4th, and 5th are all tied between me, blue, and green. And then although honestly, I think I'm a little ahead because I haven't had my 2nd turn yet. And then yellow is kind of vying for last, although they just had their turn, so they got a nice bonus. Yellow is also a robot, which is good for me to know. So I'm kind of glad I didn't secure a continent. I kind of missed that somehow, that yellow was a robot. Because of that, if I go into any border position, the robot will target it. But if I stay in mid positions, I'm much safer from the robot. It's just the way the AI works in this game. So right now I'm just alternating between my 2 big stacks and kind of trying to retain both. Keeping myself a little spread out, so at least if somebody wants to clear me from the board, it's going to be hard for them. I now have a card turn in, but I really want to avoid it if I can. But it is nice that I have a card turn in at this point. But I do have 4 cards, which makes me a big target. But I am a little harder to kill because I'm spread across the board. So we'll see how the next few turns are going to dictate how quickly I get taken out in this game, or if I have a chance of winning. And it is blue's turn. I'm guessing blue starts creeping into North America. That's kind of the classic play. But maybe they want to angle themselves to take out a player. If I'm blue, who would I want to angle to take out? Who's weak? Purple. But purple also has 4 cards. So do you want to angle yourself to protect from purple, or do you want to angle yourself to potentially take action and take out purple? Or do you want to do the traditional route, like thinking territories, and work your way up into North America? That's what blue is weighing right now. I'm guessing, I don't know, this is my theory, I might be wrong, but I have a feeling blue is going to potentially take out that 3 right above their 7 in South America. They're going the traditional route, which is actually a pretty safe move, because if they start getting really hostile with purple, who knows when purple cashes in their cards, and do they want that them to be first in line to get taken out? That was an interesting play. So they're trying to have both. That was actually not a smart play. They had a really nice stack, and having 2 7s kind of guarding their territory was an okay play, but spreading themselves out with only a 3 as that extra layer of protection, I think, was actually a weakness. We'll see if they pay for that decision. They are trying to put themselves in position, though, to where they have some core troops there, so when they do get a cash in, they have a little advantage, and they can go at purple, who's the weakest player on the board right now. Keep in mind, I currently am kind of, well, I'm not the weakest. That's good. I think I'm in like 3rd. Yellow, I mean, this is going to happen with the bots. They always overextend. Sometimes it works. I'm going to do my card caching. So again, a lot of this is a game of not doing your card caching too early, but I kind of like where I'm at. What I'm going to start doing is slowly moving my big stacks 1 card at a time to unify with each other. And we'll see if I get taken out before that's possible. Red is literally angling to take Asia. Those dreams of taking Asia will get crushed pretty soon. But red is huge advantage right now. Because of my card cash-in, I have a very temporary second place position. That'll change right now. Blue's going to cash in. They have 5 cards, and they're going to get... oh, weird. Are we not playing... I thought we were playing progressive. I think I accidentally picked a fixed game and thought it was progressive. So I've been tactically approaching this entirely wrong, like a progressive game. I somehow ended up in a fixed game. That's bizarre. So it's good I cashed in when I did. But now I need to like really angle to secure a territory. That is what happens when you are trying to do rational thinking late in a game. So we are playing a classic fixed, which is one of my favorites, not progressive. I thought we were playing progressive because I thought it started with 4. That's a little more disturbing. That makes red's domination a much more eminent threat. Red is probably going to take this game. I can't believe I was misreading this as a progressive game. So I might lose this pretty handily because it's very late in the game to be kind of free-forming it. But at this point, I'm just going to accept that the strategy I've been using is just like a very progressive based, but it's very much like I'm going territoryless in this approach. I'm doing a no continent game, which is okay. That's a possible game. It's going to be really hard for me to unify my stacks because of red. I thought we were going to have like these massive card turn-ins and it was going to be a progressive game. So this game's going to take longer. That's okay. That's just sleepiness. It's a good game so far. Some of the decisions people are making make less sense though. Because it's not progressive. So like, why is I guess I'm kind of a problem here because I'm like holding territory that I don't have to hold. Blue is being really uncharitable and selfish and trying to kind of hold too much territory. So I'm just going to keep creeping towards my other big stack. My idea is to eventually end up in Asia, and I'm going to start hitting probably red's little stacks in Asia. Because red, similarly, like, you're not going to take Asia. Especially because we're not playing... and I have a good card turn in next, so that'll be good. But we're just going to commit fully. Now that I realize I made the error of thinking, oh, don't hit my 15. Oh, that could suck so bad. He really wants to hold Asia. It's very interesting. And he might, you know, like, because I thought everybody was strategically positioning themselves to accommodate for a progressive game, but the fact that they're letting red get away with that is shocking. I think a lot of it has to do with my failure to close my territory. It puts everybody at risk because you have a continent that hasn't been secured. And so that puts green in conflict with yellow. It puts purple in conflict with yellow. Yellow needs to like chill and pick a continent. Yellow's too spread out. But I'm not in the best or worst position right now. The only thing I don't like is that I think I have to hit those big stacks of red. And that's going to be potentially dangerous because if I hit red's 5, they're going to want to retaliate and put their 13 into my 15, and then I'm in real trouble in this game. Is there a place I can maneuver? We'll figure it out. Another potential move would be to, because I'm not holding territory and I'm trying to do a no continent game, it could be actually let red take Asia, let them fight it, and work my way to an area less hostile. Boy, I really wish I had realized this was a fixed game at first, because my approach would have been a lot different. I don't know what yellow's angle is, because they're just losing troops and kind of creating enemies. And they don't have like a giant stack to show for it. So they're going to get swept off the board in a few turns. What way can I get through here that retains my power as a player? And I think the thing is, what I want to do is I want to tell red that you're not going to take Asia. And then I want to consolidate my 22 with my 36. So now I have a 36 on the board. And I am second place. Red is the table lead, justifiably so. They secured a continent really early on. I'm just going to chill where I am. Let's see how this goes. I want to try a no continent game where I'm down here. I'm kind of allowing, like, hey, purple, take some territory. You and yellow don't have to be in conflict. Does red send that into my stack? That would be the end of my game. End of theirs too. No, red is going to go for, again, they have the ambition to take Asia. That's their angle. They really think we're going to let them take Asia. But they're also improving their stack because they see the threat of my 36 right on their border. We're in a better position if blue holds both of those continents than if anyone holds Asia. You don't let people hold Asia this early in the game. That's like a death sentence for everybody at the table. That's why, like, when you're playing Risk and somebody angles for Asia, you have to stop them in their tracks. It's really hard to hold Asia because it's got like 5 defense points. Okay, we got green building up a fat stack. Green is confusing too because they're playing this more like a progressive game, which is part of why I didn't even realize we were playing fixed, because I swear, maybe I'll rewatch the video, but I could swear it said progressive when I clicked this. But I like classic fixed. It's one of my favorite games. I've been more on a progressive roll lately, but there's a different approach you take. And so it's funny that I thought, oh yeah, and I was explaining like, oh, progressive, you have to approach it a certain way that's different. And now that has come to bite me because I thought I was approaching a progressive game. Am I in kill position for anybody? I could take out purple and get 5 cards. What would that cost? 26? It's not worth it. It's like 100% not worth it. I'm chilling here. Like, red is going to think, oh, he's going to move into Asia. And it's like, nope, chilling here, letting you guys fight. This is a new strategy because I'm like, I have to commit to a no continent game at this point. So right now I'm kind of taking like a Python approach where I'm just going to sit here, stretch out, and then if I have the ability to attack and clear somebody out, I will take that opportunity. Red has a hefty lead. They're at 63, so they're like 20 troops ahead of the second place player, who is no longer me. It's Blue. Blue's gonna have about, yeah. So now we're seeing quantifiable differences of the territory holders versus the people who aren't. This is a really late place in the game to not hold territory, especially if you're yellow. Particularly, you're in a really bad spot because you're at this point, you're the fish. Like, people are gonna start chewing at you for card takes. And by the way, yellow is the robot, so that kind of makes sense that yellow is spreading themselves too thin because the robot's just like an attack machine. Which also kind of better explains green's strategy, because green would lose to the robot if they try to hold all those borders when they have so much yellow after them right now. Purple. Wow. Blue is being so aggressive. They're definitely making enemies. I mean, I'm not making friends being where I'm at because I'm a threat to everybody around me, but Blue, just for the heck of it, just to be a dick, holding that 15 there. Oh, man. Again, it could work, but man, purple does not like you right now. So if you act on purple, dude, you need to be prepped for... I mean, I guess blue could go at purple pretty hard next turn because he does have his territory bonus, but if I were blue, I'd try to be a little nicer because now you're making an enemy. Like, purple really wants you gone. Red wants me gone. That's my one enemy here. Red was super close to slowly just owning Asia, and I've just thwarted their efforts. So they're going to try to get rid of me if they can. Yellow is done. I don't see yellow recovering. Ooh, clever. So red, in putting that 3 there, was like, I'm going to card block you. But luckily, I'm in like a 2 territory position. So the other advantage is I can do this and still gather a card. It's going to be harder to card block me in this area because I have a lot of points around me. And I'm going to check my cards. No turn in. Man, I thought this was a progressive game, so this is going to go a little bit longer than I thought. I thought, I'll play a quick progressive game because they go very quickly. And so far, we're playing a 6-player game. We're at the point where people are accruing like 40 stacks and 50 stacks, and no one's been cleared off the board yet. Now we see somebody leave the board. I don't think he has the troops to finish it, though. Oh, he does. Good. He has good rolls. Yellow's gone. Blue gets 3 cards. Okay move, but it makes you very vulnerable to green. But again, we're not playing progressive, so total takeouts take longer in this version of the game. Right now, I'm most nervous about red, because red's going to be the one person who really wants to see me leave my position. Because my position here is literally holding red from taking Asia, and that was red's strategy. It's a bad strategy. I mean, it's not always bad. If you can get away with it, sure, take Asia. But in general, with Australia, you got to play a different game than that. With especially seasoned players, because seasoned players are not going to let you take Asia. I've had a few games where you kind of are forced to let them take Asia, but it's really few and far between. You rarely see somebody hold Asia. Okay, so now we're down to a 5-person game. It goes so much slower in fixed, and I love fixed, but I didn't realize I was signing up for that. So we got this slow and steady game. Blue is so far getting away with being really hostile with purple. Purple needs to fight blue to hold England, or Europe. So I think one or the other is going to happen, where blue is going to gradually increase. Man, red is still at it trying to take Asia. Red has taken quite a bit of Asia, and the rest of the board has really not fought it, which is insane. Because if you look at the amount of territories that red is now occupying, it's quite a lot. And now red's trying to size themselves up so they can really come at me. They might even do the old strategy of sending little bursts of troops to just gradually reduce me down out of my territory. But sad for them, I have a nice card turn in coming up. And I think what I'll do is unlock blue just to create a little more conflict. Of everybody at the board, now the fish, like the term the fish is like whoever the weakest is. Temporarily, purple is the fish. Green is in a pretty solid territory for a no continent game. I don't know what they do with it, though. If they want to angle to take out purple, they could do that, cash in and get those 4 cards. But the cost to get there in a non-progressive game, this might actually cost him the game. Because you're only going to, at most, get 10 troops. So this cost to get you there is going to cost you something that's hard to recover from. Do they have that good of a roll? Oh, okay, yeah, they went. So now they're at like 39 troops. If I wanted to, I could take blue out next turn. I probably won't do that because blue or green is in a really, maybe I will. This is opening up a big possibility. I think I have to eat green now. For 3 cards? Yeah, that's worth 3 cards. Let's do it. Okay, let's take out green. So, I'll just do like a real easy takeout. We'll do, how many cards do I have? So I'm not going to get a turn in from this move, but I think I'll consolidate, come on. I'll consolidate after this move. And I'm going to let blue have their 25 and take North America, which is a very risky thing. But I think that I'm reading that I'm kind of getting the vibe that that red is a very aggressive player. So I think what's going to happen is red is going to be aggressive, blue is going to be aggressive, and my hope is to have the 2 fight each other and not team up and fight me. I do have a really nice card turn in next turn if I last. Red does have a 22, and red is going to finally be able to achieve their dreams of taking Asia. And not only that, they're going to push forward and take everything that they possibly can. Red might win this game. Instead, red is going to potentially maybe be helpful to me. They're eating a lot of my supposed territory, assuming I was trying to hold it. And all I was trying to do was get that card cash in. So I kind of don't mind. How does blue respond? Yeah, red is being really aggressive, but kind of stupidly so. Like, because what do you get out of this other than a cost of cards? Like, people can clear you out pretty easy now. So it kind of played out how I was hoping in a little bit. Blue is kind of in a position where they kind of have to attack red. Like, they can clear me out a little bit, but blue will lose this game if they... It's one of those points of, like, if we both... Like, if me and blue don't combine our forces, red's at 88 troops. So red's at that magic number where they have the troops that's both of us combined. So what that means is if blue doesn't start hitting red, we lose this game. Like, we both have to hit red. But I feel like the way blue is playing very passively, I think blue doesn't do anything. I think they take like 2 cards and then close their turn in hopes that I take the fight to red, and then that red and I kind of clear each other out. But they got to look at the numbers. If you're blue, like if blue just holds North America right now, they're not trying to win this game. Like, they're just kind of resigning to losing, which is exactly what they're doing. And they have 39, and I am going to kill blue so that I can take second. Because if blue's going to play for second, then we're going to play for second. Like, you know, you're going to get, like, blue, you want to angle that way and have me kill myself to fight red when red's more than both of us combined. Yeah, go F yourself, man. I will take you out of the game because you're a coward. I hope I can take you out of the game. I think I will pretty solidly do that. And at least the coward doesn't win. Because at that point, it's like, it literally is like, if blue is not working with me, then we are losing this game regardless. So that got us card cash in. It's not going to be enough to win. So we will lose this game, but we will come in second. And I usually don't play for second, but when I'm playing with somebody who is literally just playing for second, it's like, okay, let's play for second. So let's clear out as much as we can of this. I think I mainly want to hit these like key bonus territories here, like this upper area. Like, if I can, it'd be cool to like hit all of it. And then they have a card cash in, I think. Yeah, that's as best as we're going to clear them out. So I'm going to go ahead and move my 7 here. And then let's just hope we have some luck. We don't. So we're going to lose this game. Yeah, 32 to 82, that's not going to work. But you have to realize that's what the game was going to be if blue didn't collaborate, which blue was trying. It's not a bad play, but blue was just kind of assuming that I'm going to, in good faith, fight red and we'll kill each other because I can't beat red at that point. Little did he know, I'm not going to let him hold North America and South America and then me have to fight red while you build up mass troops and dominate us both. Like, if you're going to be a coward and not hit red, then I'm going to be a coward and not hit red. Bad play by red's part, but that was a good move. So red will win this game. Them moving the 48 out is great. They're in position to basically just sweep the board next. So we do get 8 troops, which is a nice little turn in. I think I will continue to eat as many troops as I possibly can. And we'll just let their little 36 like do its business. So let's see, where can we eat the most troops that'll do the most harm? I think we'll do here. That 36, though, is going to just, like I said, this next turn, and I think they likely have a card turn in, so I think they win this game next turn. But at these end stages, I cannot reiterate enough like the kind of importance of playing through and playing, like, clearing as much as you can at this stage, because sometimes unexpected things happen. I doubt this is going to be one of those scenarios, but I've played games where you're in this dire of a situation where it turns around and you actually win. So in Risk, never give up until the end. But I think I'm dead. Yeah, this will be the kill. The question is, do they run out of time? And even if they run out of time, and I don't even have a card turn in. So the cards didn't work in my favor. Blue was cowardly, and so there was no winning this game. But we came in second, which is cool. And coming in second, considering like half of the game, the core initial beginning half, I misunderstood and thought I was playing progressive. I'll call that a win. I course corrected okay once I realized my error. I don't feel bad about this game. I didn't play badly. I didn't play great, but I didn't play badly. Although I can play fixed way better than what you just saw. And again, I just will attribute that to like 2 a.m. Excuses. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. It's been fun. It's been fun having you guys hang in chats. It was fun to work on art and think about philosophy and some deeper themes. If you haven't yet watched the vlog that I posted, they're like a long win player. So now they just want to exploit and enjoy the fact that I am completely dead. There's no angle of this game to win at this point. So just to make it fun for them, I'll make it a little chase. I'll break 2 of their territories. And then they can kill me next turn. And I'll just say, hey, good game. End turn. If I could have cashed in my card, I'd have some kind of fighting chance. But yeah, there's nothing you can do at that point. And this game's actually a really good example of like Black was pretty much sure to win that game once they doubled us. Like, and that's a good point. That's a good time to start clearing the board. If you're playing fixed, you get to the point where it's down to the last 3 players, and you are both players combined, then that's a good thing. I think that player is not a great player that I just lost to, so I'm going to lose some ranking points. Yeah, that was a beginner. So that expert ranking might go down a bit. We'll find out. So it might be like from 14 to 13, but it was a fun game, and it was a nice way to end out the night. Thanks, guys. If you haven't hit subscribe, hit like. Make sure that you have hit like. I'm watching. You right there, the one that hasn't hit the like button, it's right there. It takes 2 seconds. You've gotten a bunch of free content. Just hit the like. Do it. Okay, ready? I'm waiting. Good. Okay. You too. Okay. That'll do it. Have a good night, guys. And let me know in the comments section your thoughts on determinism and some of these discussions. Do you like this kind of content? Speak now or forever hold your peace, because I will just cycle through a lot of this kind of stuff. And we're one step closer to having another page done on our graphic novel. All right. See you guys.